The Alpha's Rogue Mate. Written by Short Story Queen. The forest breathed around me, cold and damp, a living thing that seemed to lean close and listen. Pine needles bit my feet, slick mud tried to steal my balance, and the night closed like a fist as I ran. Behind me came boot beats and the low-controlled huffs of wolves pacing the flanks. No shouting, no chaos. They hunted like one body with many moving parts. Left, Nyx urged, her voice a current under my ribs. Cross the creek. Make them choose between sound and scent. I veered toward the silver flicker of water, lungs burning, legs hot with lactic fire. Branches slapped my face. Somewhere to my right, a whistle clicked, short and soft, and bodies shifted to cut me off. I snapped a dead limb from a snag and hurled it hard into the brush to my left. It crashed away like a fleeing animal. Footsteps pivoted and split. A breath of space opened. Two shadows dropped in front of me, moving with that calm, relentless precision I had come to hate. I slid to a stop on wet leaves and went low as one lunged. My palm slammed his wrist, my shoulder drove under his guard, and I spun him toward the other. Armor knocked armor. I slipped between them, took 4 fast steps, and met a third warrior head-on. His blade flashed. I shoved inside the arc and raked claws across his ribs. Metal grated under my nails and sparks snapped in the dark. He swore and staggered back into a trunk. 2 more at your back, Nyx warned. Don't get pinned. I didn't. I bolted for the water, ankle shrieking as I hit slick stones and slid. The creek was spring cold, a slap that stole my breath. I jumped the last strip of black current and landed hard. The scent of blood lifted off me, iron bright in the damp. My temple was wet again. I wiped it with the back of my hand and tasted copper. The trees ahead thinned. I pushed for speed, rounding a stand of spruce, and almost ran into the body of a man who seemed to have been poured from the night itself. He stood without moving, like a tall stone at the center of a stream that refused to yield. Gold eyes took me in. The line of his mouth never softened. Kalen. The patrol ghosted in behind me and fanned into a crescent without a word. One limped. One cradled an arm I'd bruised to the bone. Aldrich appeared at the Alpha's shoulder, lighter on his feet than men his size had a right to be. Attention mapping exits, threats, the terrain. The weight of the pack's focus pressed the air flat. I forced my chin up and met the gold. The wind shifted, my scent blew straight into him. Something hit the clearing that wasn't sound. Kalen's jaw tightened. His pupils widened until the gold burned in a ring. His shoulders locked the way a man locks his arms around a wild thing and refuses to let it move him. A heat wave rolled through me, undercut by a shock that pushed every other thought aside. Mate. The word didn't come from Nyx. It crashed through me from outside and echoed back from inside until I didn't know where it had been born. Nyx snarled, hackles high. No. Not him. The warriors felt the shift even if they didn't understand it. A murmur crackled along their line and died at a glance from Aldrich. Kalen didn't blink. He breathed in again, slower, deeper, as if learning a new scent might change the shape of truth. The world redrew itself around him. Smoke and frost and something green under it pulled like hunger. I stood my ground because flight would look like fear and fear would smell like weakness. The rogue scent already clung to me like a stain. The stripped-out emptiness left when a mind link is severed. Let them choke on it. A young warrior edged closer, his blade angled at my thigh. On your knees. I didn't look at him, I kept my eyes on Kalen. Try it. He moved fast and sure, used to wolves folding when he snapped. I didn't fold. I knocked his wrist, twisted, drove my palm into his throat, and watched surprise break across his face before he stumbled. Another lunged. I slid under his arm, slammed my shoulder into his ribs, and hooked his ankle. He dropped. The third cut for my head. I ducked, felt steel slice a lock of hair, and rammed an elbow into the soft place under his ribs. Air blasted from him. A hand closed on the back of my neck. Not a grip that crushed. A claim of space that made every other body in the clearing irrelevant. Heat stamped into the skin under his palm, An imprint I could still feel as the rest of the cold pressed in. My body went still, because instincts older than my name told it to. Nick shoved against that stillness without breaking it. Don't submit. Survive. I turned my eyes up to him. His face looked carved, every harsh line precisely where time had put it. But something restless moved under the skin. The gold of his eyes burned with a darker rim, a storm building at the edges. The muscle in his cheek jumped once. Name. It rolled out of him like a command shaped from more than sound. My body wanted to obey. Pride wanted to lay teeth into it. I compromised by giving him what he already had. Celine. His fingers tightened a fraction, nothing anyone else would notice. Aldrich watched every tiny shift with the attention of a blade testing a whetstone. The patrol held so still the forest seemed to notice them again. Rogue, someone muttered. She reeks of it. I met the air head-on. Rogue by force, not choice. Kalen didn't change expression, but the pressure of his hand altered in that small, indefinable way you feel before you can name it. Not leniency. Awareness. He didn't let go. Aldrich's voice came quiet and practical. We finish this and move. Take the head. Sweep the ridge. Kalen didn't look away from me. His eyes flicked to my mouth and back to my eyes. Small, controlled, as if he hated that his attention wandered at all. The wind shifted again, carrying my blood and breath to him. The heat that shot down my spine nearly took my knees. Careful, Nix warned, suddenly steady. That pull burns both ways. Kalen's palm lifted from my neck. The imprint of it throbbed like a fresh bruise. He stepped back a half pace, enough to give the room his presence had taken, not enough to surrender an inch of control. He didn't look at Aldrich when he spoke. Bind her. The young warrior I'd kicked limped forward, chain in his hands. He hesitated, darting a look at Kalen's now empty palm like he feared the space it had held. Kalen's gaze slid over him, cool, and the hesitation snapped. The chain closed around my wrists, cold and rough, iron scent scraping against the living scent of my skin. I didn't fight it. Fighting here only brought pain I couldn't use. The warrior took a breath, maybe to indulge the easy spite of yanking the metal hard enough to bruise, and caught Aldrich's stare. He finished the knot cleanly and stepped back. The pack watched. Confusion under discipline. Hunger under confusion. The way wolves watch a thing they can't eat yet, but don't trust to leave alone. Why run this deep into our land? Kalen's voice found the spaces the cold had left in me and pressed there. I stood straighter. My arms were heavy before my chest, chain tight enough to bite if I moved too fast. Mud dried on my legs. Blood had crusted sticky along my hairline. Because yours still have trees, I said. Everyone else cuts them down and burns what's left. The words moved something small at the corner of his mouth, not toward softness, toward thought. He breathed in again, more controlled now, as if he'd managed to push the first brutal surge back under the armor he wore around his will. Fenrir prowled under his skin, close enough that I felt the pressure drop when the wolf's attention slid across me. Nix lifted her head and bared her teeth in my mind. Do not bow. Aldrich's attention flicked across the patrol's faces, reading them. A beat later, I felt the hum of the mind link brush the air, not the words, only the weather of them. Hold the spread. Watch the ridge. Signal the gate. A wave of acknowledgement rippled through the group like tall grass bending to a gust, and then lifted, invisible again. Why alone? Aldrich's eyes stayed on me even as he spoke to Kalen. He didn't step between us. He didn't need to. Rogues travel in packs of their own kind. Rogues travel where lies drive them. I answered, without looking at him. My family didn't choose exile. A soldier snorted, short and ugly. They chose blood. My gaze snapped to him. I didn't bother to hide the hate that lived there. I didn't. Kalen watched the exchange the way a man watches a fire decide which way to run. His attention came back to me, with that same relentless focus that turned everything else into background. He didn't ask about my father. He didn't feed me the accusation I had heard all my life. He stood still, and the weight of that stillness pressed me to choose what I wanted to say. "I'm not here to spill your people's blood," I said. "I came to cross your trees, not burn them." The patrol shifted again, unsettled. It wasn't the words. It was the audacity of speaking them to an alpha whose wolves had bled under rogue teeth. Aldrich's jaw clicked once, a muscle working. Kalen's gold narrowed. For a breath I thought he would reach out and touch the chain, not to test it, but to put his hand where it had been on my neck. He didn't. He gave nothing to the impulse that tried to rise. The control in him was a living thing. A howl unfurled in the distance, low and layered, an anchored sound that pulled the edges of the night tight. The patrol lifted their chins a fraction, listening. The reply ran along the mind link, invisible and absolute. Kalen's eyes flicked away and back as he read whatever answer traveled on that current. He didn't relay it aloud. He didn't need to. The pack adjusted in subtle ways, formation tightening, awareness widening. A wolf form parted the trees on our flank, dark and huge, pacing with us for 3 heartbeats before ghosting back into shadow. It didn't cross the clearing, didn't draw attention. It didn't need to. Fenrir's presence pressed along my skin like the knowledge of a storm building beyond the ridge. Nyx rose and planted her paws, unblinking. He will try to make the ground we stand on his. "We will make it ours long enough to live through this," I answered. "Move," Aldrich said, voice even, "form 2 rings." The patrol shifted around me. 2 took the rear with spears low, 2 flanked the front. Aldrich settled at Kalen's right shoulder, the place he belonged. Kalen did not claim a place in the circle. He walked where he wanted, which happened to be nearer to me than anyone else liked. We started back through the trees, the cold bit deeper now that movement slowed. My ankle barked every time a root rolled under my toes. I didn't limp. I would rather bleed. The chain pulled when I lifted a hand to push a branch, so I ducked and let wet needles comb my hair. Torches pricked the black ahead, spaced at intervals along the approach like stars pinned at eye height. The wall rose from the earth, wood banded with stone, dark and solid, torches guttering in iron bowls along the ramparts. The scent of the wards crawled across my skin. Not visible, very real. Old oaths, hammered into wood and rock until even a wolf's bones could taste them. The gate yawned open on a baritone groan. Faces peered down from the platforms, eyes narrowing as they caught the smell of me. The rogue scent thickened under the weight of the wards until it felt like an accusation I wore like a second skin. We passed under the arch and into the throat of the stronghold. Echoes stacked on echoes as boots and paws struck stone. I glanced once at Kalen. He was not looking at the walls or the guards or the torches. He was looking at me with that same relentless steadiness, as if memorizing where I fit in the world would keep the world from moving. The heat I hated so much coiled again tighter. A brand pressed to the back of my neck from a hand that wasn't touching me. "Alpha?" One of the gate watchers called from the platform, respectful and uneasy. "Orders." I didn't break eye contact with him, he didn't break it with me. The answer came flat, controlled, iron-wrapped. Alive. The word traveled like a thrown spear through the watchers, through the patrol, through me. A beat later, the chain between my wrists jerked as the young warrior reset his grip, not cruel, just certain. And I looked at him, then back at Kalen. The torchlight gilded the planes of his face and the hard line of his mouth. He didn't flinch from the defiance in my stare. He didn't answer it either. He simply stood in the doorway of his own world and claimed mine with a single, merciless command. The patrol closed in tighter, confusion rippling under discipline, the kind that made men glance at each other and then pretend they hadn't. Aldrich's gaze sliced across the circle, and the glances stopped. The gate rumbled shut behind us, a deep final sound that put stone between me and the forest. I looked at the chain, then at Kalen, and raised my chin against the weight of his decision. The cold settled into my bones. Nyx pressed her shoulder to mine from the inside. Alive is not safe, she warned. No, I answered, but it is a place to start. Stone swallowed sound as we moved deeper, a breath at a time, torches hissing as if the air down here disliked flame. The guard on my left kept a firm hold on the chain between my wrists. The one at my back walked close enough for the spear-tip shadow to touch my spine. Aldrich's tread at the front never faltered. The corridor bent, dropped, and opened on iron doors with small square windows like missing teeth. Damp clung to the walls, old and patient. Keep your head up, Nyx murmured inside me, rough and steady. If they smell fear, they will test it. I held it high. The door 3 from the end groaned wide under Aldrich's shoulder. The cell ate light, packed earth floor, stone walls beaded with moisture. An iron ring set waist-high in the far wall, its lip polished by more hands than I wanted to imagine. I stepped inside under my own power. Pride had limits, but I could choose how I crossed thresholds. A guard hooked my chain to the ring and turned a key. Cold bit skin rubbed raw by the chase. The other set a bucket in one corner, a wooden cup beside it. Habit made their movements neat. Aldrich's gaze tracked the lock, then me. Up close, the fine lines at the corners of his eyes weren't from laughter. He measured the shape of my problem, and where it would press against the pack. Food and water twice, he told the guards. No one goes in alone unless ordered. No one touches her without permission. What if she tries the bars? Let her discover how much pain iron gives back, he answered. We call a healer only if infection threatens. He didn't sound cruel, just practical. A breath of colder air slid through the doorway. The room changed, the way a river changes when a boulder drops into it. Kalen stood there, not crossing the threshold. The gold in his eyes banked low. Alone. The guards were gone before the word finished cooling. Aldrich waited one fraction longer, a question in the tilt of his head. Kalen's stillness answered it. Aldrich let out a breath and pulled the door most of the way shut. The bar waited, not yet dropped. Kalen took one step into the cell. Presence altered the math of the room. He stopped where he had already measured the limit of my reach. If I lunged, the chain would scrape his chest and throw me back. He didn't need to check. He knew. Rogue, he said, rolling the taste of the word in the air. You fought like someone who intends to keep breathing. Unfashionable, I know. His gaze flicked to the cut at my temple, the rub marks where iron kissed my wrists, the line of dried blood in my hair. It returned to my mouth as if pulled, then dragged itself back to my eyes. Fenrir moved behind his face, slow and heavy, a crown-wearing beast that understood rooms like this. Do not bend, Nyx told me. Make him do the work of the silence. He closed the distance by inches until heat reached me across the chill. The scent followed, smoke and frost with a green undertone that loosened muscles I didn't want softening. I locked my knees and let the wall hold some of my weight so he wouldn't see it. You crossed my border with blood on your skin. Your patrol put most of it there. There was blood before them. My own, I answered, not yours. He let quiet stretch until it became a tool. Water ticked somewhere in the stone. He had the kind of patience that cuts. I refused to fill the space. You are a problem, he said at last. I tend to be. Not like this, he replied. Low enough the words lived between us instead of beyond. Not to me. Heat slid along the back of my neck where his hand had held me in the forest. The ghost of that grip burned like a brand. Something thin and stubborn had rooted there. I hated that every nerve wanted to turn toward it. You're alive because I choose it. I know. I don't mistake mercy for weakness. Don't mistake it for mercy. It landed closer to confession than threat. He stepped back half a breath, as if startled by how near he drifted without touch. The chain scraped the ring. His attention caught on the sound, then returned to me with a restraint so precise it felt like wire pulled tight. Your father, he said, and the word carried knife edges. He put our elders in the snow, burned our stores, cut my mother's throat on our threshold. He laughed. His voice didn't waver, it made the air cold. "Then you know what you think you know," I said, keeping mine even. "Do you know who set the lie that made him into what you remember?" "No lie turns a man into that." "No truth does either," I answered. "Only a chain of causes so tight around the neck that breath becomes blood." A footfall paused outside. Aldrich leaned on the room the way a man leans on a wind he can't stop. Kaelin didn't look at the door. "Speak." "Rumor already warms the gate," Aldrich said. "They smelled rogue and wonder why it stands under our roof. They ask if we take heads or trophies." The mind link's current drew tight, bright, unseen. Kaelin sent something down it hard as flint. The walls seemed to exhale. "They also wonder if your judgment is clouded," Aldrich added, "as yours. I watch and wait." "Good." Aldrich didn't move. He held the edge of the scene like a secondary truth, ready to catch consequences if they fell the wrong way. Kaelin gave him nothing else. His gaze stayed on me until the cell felt like a circle drawn around our throats. Fenrir pressed closer. The click of his claws wasn't sound, and I heard it anyway. Claim her. That wolf urged inside the edges of Kaelin's control. Ours. Keep. Protect. Nyx lifted her head sharply. "Try it," she warned. "Not a taunt. A promise. We'll see who bleeds first." Kaelin's chest rose on a deeper breath. Tendons stood in his throat like cables. His gaze slid to my mouth, down to iron-cutting skin, back to my eyes. Lightning leaves scars and wood. The fight in him left marks in the air. "You will remain alive," he said, ironed flat. "Anyone who disobeys answers to me." The order sank into the hall through the link. Aldrich's reply was smooth. "Understood." Kaelin looked at the ragged line of dried blood at my temple again. He turned his head slightly, as if to call a healer. "No." His eyes cut back, sharp. "You prefer infection?" "I prefer not to have hands on me without need. Alive is enough." Something altered at his mouth, not approval, not amusement. Recognition, maybe. Two fighters on their feet after a round that should have ended it. "You want truths," he said. "Earn them." "You want loyalty," I answered. "Stop mistaking me for a blade my father threw. For now, you are a blade I keep sheathed in my walls. For now." The bareness of that phrase felt honest. Permanent words are how people lie to themselves. He took a step that was neither close nor away. The pull in the room didn't change. He studied the iron at my wrists again, then reached. Not to hurt, not to soothe. The motion belonged to no single part of him. His hand stopped a finger's width from my face, as if the air had turned to glass. Heat poured from his palm. The scent hit hard enough to stagger. For a moment the world narrowed to the space his fingers did not cross, and the skin that remembered where he had held me. Control snapped taut like a rope yanked. He pulled back as if the air scorched him. Fenrir snarled at the denial. Nyx planted her paws and held steady against the shock of want and refusal, twisting into one rope. "Out," Kaelin said, not to me. Aldrich filled the doorway, eyes sweeping the distance, filing what he saw in the part of him that does not bend. "The pack wants answers," he said. "They will settle for orders. They have them. Anyone who breaks them remembers who leads. They will also ask why." "They don't need why," Kaelin said. "Not yet." "Do you want her moved deeper?" "Here," he answered. "Close enough to reach if I'm wrong." Aldrich's mouth tightened. He didn't argue. He turned to go. "One more thing," Kaelin said. "Let it be known without shouting. Anyone who touches her without my order answers to me before they answer to the moon." "Understood." He left. The corridor breathed damp and iron and men trying not to think too loudly. Kaelin stayed a heartbeat longer, as if asking his feet to obey decisions the rest of him had already made. He let the full weight of his attention fall without disguise. "You will be questioned," he said, "by me. I expected nothing softer. You will answer. I will answer what deserves answers." His gaze cut to the chain as I lifted my hands an inch. Not a threat. A reminder that the distance was a lie. The metal had bitten red crescents into skin. He looked at those marks and something rough moved through his face. Water. A guard appeared as if pulled on a string from the link, set a wooden cup within reach, a heel of bread that could have been a stone in its first life. Eyes down, he retreated. I didn't lunge. I drank slow, to keep from showing hunger, and let the water sit like a small mercy. The tremor in my hands quieted. Your pack will not like this, I said, and they don't have to like it. They will test it. They will learn. His voice had the flat certainty of a man who had broken wolves and made them stronger. He watched me set the cup down, watched the way cold had begun to sink bone deep, and how stubbornness kept me standing straight. He turned to the door. You will not die here. Not a promise. A decision carved into stone. He stepped out. The bar dropped with a weighty thud that vibrated the wall. His steps moved away and up until they were only the place's own pulse. I leaned back against the stone and looked at the hairline crack at eye level, a crooked little path that would go nowhere for 100 years. The cut at my temple tugged as it dried. My ankle throbbed dull and steady. The chain tested my wrist and found them unwilling to give. The corridor rustled a short time later. A healer stood in the doorway with a small bundle and a look that tried for indifference and landed on tired. Alpha's order, clean the wound, no salve that will stink up the hall. She worked quick and careful, wiping blood away with water that tasted of fewer stones than what I'd drunk. Her touch didn't linger. Her eyes didn't hold hate, only the weariness of someone who's seen more wounds than wisdom. When she was gone, the sting sharpened briefly, then eased. I smelled faint herbs and nothing else. Silence settled above. Doors thudded. The stronghold turned in its sleep. The mind link's weather shifted and steadied, orders passing, replies returning. I could feel the pressure changes without understanding the words. That was what exile did, stripped you out of a chorus until even silence sounded different. Why fight it? A voice asked 2 cells down, rough from disuse, curious rather than cruel, because it's trying to decide me. A quiet huff that wasn't quite laughter. That's its favorite trick. Has it decided you? Long ago, the voice replied, I still argue. We let quiet return. I ate enough bread to give the water something to catch, then lowered my hands until the chain stopped biting so viciously. Cold climbed and settled. Nyx pressed against me from the inside, shoulder to shoulder, a warmth the room couldn't take. Alive is not safe, she warned. No, but it is a place to start. Above, a single howl rolled through the rafters, low and steady, answered by many throats with seamless unity. The air hummed with it, then dimmed. I breathed with the rhythm of a soldier's sleep, shallow and alert, waking to every change in the corridor's breath. Heat still lived at the place on my neck where his hand had been. The bond we had both refused to touch stood between us like a road neither of us chose, patient and terrible, waiting for dawn. Night pressed down on the stronghold until the roofs clicked with frost and the torches along the ramparts guttered low. Above the dungeons, the main hall held its heat like a heart. Thick beams crossed high under the rafters, smoke crept toward the vents, and the long table slept under its weight of scars. Kaelin stood in the shadow of the great hearth and watched the flames lift and fold, the color of burnished coins and old blood. The pack's mind link thrummed just beneath hearing, a steady, disciplined tide. Runners reporting that the southern snare lines were reset. The eastern patrol swapping shifts without chatter. Cooks complaining briefly about meat gone tough in the cold. All of it moving through him as a second weather. He could close his eyes and feel the shape of his people. By the way the current flowed, a body's worth of signals coming back to the brain. He did not close his eyes. The moment he did, his mind hammered a different image against the dark. A girl with mud on her legs, iron at her wrists, and a stare that refused to lower. And behind the stare, a scent that had changed the geometry of the world. Fenrir paced just under his ribs, restless and heavy. The wolf had not shut up since the forest. The arguments came in lean, raw sentences, not words. Ours. Keep. Protect. Claim. The pressure of that wanting sat right where the old wanting had sat for years, the one that thirsted for the blood of a man who had burned elders and laughed over a dying Luna. The emotions did not cancel each other. They layered until his chest felt built of wire and stone. Aldrich approached across the hall without sound. The beta moved like a soldier trying not to wake a sleeping thing that would strike, if startled. He stopped at an angle that kept respect without pretending distance. Kalen did not turn. "They are quiet for now," Aldrich said, voice low. "Quiet is not calm. They won't break. They will test." "They can test," Kalen answered. "I didn't carve my name into this hall to stumble on my own threshold." Aldrich looked into the fire. The lines at the corners of his eyes set deeper, as if he could see every fight that had soaked that hearth with heat. They want the story they have lived to stay true. Rogues are easy. Kill on sight. Burn the trail. The story makes the hard parts easier. Kalen finally shifted his gaze. "You think I do not understand the comfort of an enemy you do not have to look at. I think you understand better than anyone." Aldrich paused. "You want my counsel? If I didn't, I wouldn't keep you where you can see me. Then here it is. If she is what the bond says she is, you cannot keep her in a cell forever. If she is what our history says she is, you cannot let her live. Either choice will split something, here or here." He tapped the wood over his chest, then the beam above their heads. "Pick which break you can survive, and do it fast." The mind link tightened under Kalen's skin as if bracing for impact. He could have told Aldrich he already had picked, in the only way he could for a single night. Alive. He could have told him that the word had tasted like iron in his mouth and he hated it and would say it again anyway. He said none of that. "Guard rotations at the cells?" "Doubled. No one alone per your order. Healer already down and back." She kept her eyes open. "She didn't spit?" "No." "Good." Aldrich waited. Kalen returned his attention to the fire. The flames leaned, found new air, and changed shape. Fenrir pressed harder, impatient now, the way a storm presses on the roofs before it starts ripping shingles free. "She didn't run," Kalen said at last, almost to the flames. "In the attack, she could have gone with them. She stayed. She pulled one of ours out from under a falling pine with iron buckles that should have caught her hands and held her there. She also drew blood on 3 of ours in the forest," Aldrich said. "Good," Kalen answered. "I don't want a mate who folds like paper." Aldrich's eyes did not flicker, but approval edged the lines around them. "Then you know what you hope she is." "I know what fate has thrown at my feet and called a road," Kalen said. "Whether I walk it is mine." He lifted his chin, sending a thin pulse through the link. The hall shifted in response. A pair of guards at the far door straightened. A sentry outside kicked heat back into a slumping torch. No more than 2 words, and yet the pack breathed it. He could have sent anything along that strand. He could have pulled the entire structure up by its roots and shaken it. Instead, he let the line settle and turned from the fire. "Sleep a little," Aldrich said. "I'll sleep when I can do it without seeing my mother's throat." Kalen replied, too plain to be dramatic. "That will not be tonight." He left the hall in a drift of smoke and heat and took the stair down alone. Cold climbed the steps in bands. The deeper he went, the more the stone remembered winter. The corridor at the bottom hummed softly with the breath of sleeping or sullen men. A guard straightened when Kalen rounded the bend. Another drew his shoulders back until the spear in his hand stood perfectly vertical. Neither met his eyes. Respect that was fear would do for now. Kalen stood outside Celine's door without entering. He did not reach for the bar. He let the night sit between them like glass. He did not need to see her to sense her awake, almost as if the bond had already started to breed new instincts into him without asking permission. The awareness was small and specific, a bright pinprick at the center of the map his mind kept of this place. He could have drawn a line to where she leaned her spine against the stone and watched the air like it might change shape. The silence inside had its own sound. He listened to it, then left it be, and returned to the stairs. Above ground again, he crossed the yard to the outer wall. Frost frosted the top layer of dirt, pale and hard. Beyond the palisade, the forest lay like a dark ocean, frozen mid-surge. He set his palms to the cold wood and let the air bite his skin until the sharpness of it cleared the kind of fog even alphas carry, when they are one choice away from creating new maps. Fenrir rose in him clean and enormous, and for a few breaths Kalen stopped wrestling. He let the wolf run the sums. Protect, this one breathes, keep. This one is ours, and that word has weight. And the other sums, the ones not even wolves escape. Blood cries out. The past demands. The balance must be paid. Kalen lowered his head, eyes closed to the forest, to listen harder. The pack's tide rolled and steadied. No alarms. No movement where there should not be. He could stand here until the sky eased toward dawn, and nothing would change except the color of the light. He didn't want to stand anymore. He pushed off the wall and went back down. Celine did not sleep. She held still and let the quiet tell her what it could. The stone had seams full of old cold. The air had a small tremor wherever the guard shifted his weight to ease a knee. The torch outside the door had a little blister in the sap that hissed every so often. Her mind fit those pieces together without looking, the way a hand fits a knife it knows too well. Under it, another current moved, not the pack's link, another thread that had been stitched into her without consent. The moment scent hit scent, and something old chose for both of them. Nyx lay long inside her, watchful and unblinking. The wolf's breath matched Celine's when she let it. When she refused to let it, Nyx huffed once and took the matching anyway. "They do not know what you are," Nyx said inside her skull, the words as clear as spoken if anyone had been able to hear it. "They know what you have been told you are. They know I smell like exile." "They know you smell like a story they are not done telling," Nyx replied. "You smelled like a person when you pulled that warrior out from under the pine." Celine tipped her head back until the hard point of stone dug into her scalp and anchored her. "He watched me like I was a blade he had to sheath without cutting his hand." "He watched you like the first warm wind when the river is still ice," Nyx said. "It makes wolves stupid. It makes them act like spring is not dangerous." Celine let a breath out slow. Her wrist throbbed where iron rubbed. The healer's work had cleaned the cut at her temple, but the skin pulled when she frowned. She didn't let herself test the chain again. She already knew the answer. "He will come," Nyx said, "and he already has." "Again," the wolf replied. "When the night feels thin and his control has been eaten by his thoughts. He will come then." Celine didn't answer. It was true, and truth didn't need to be fed. She studied the dark and tried to assemble a future that did not require her to break everything she had left. It was a short exercise. The future would demand something ugly. It always did. Time changed weight. It did that in cells and sick rooms and snowstorms. Minutes turned to stones, hours to water. Steps came and went along the corridor. A bucket clanked distantly. Once 2 men laughed, quick and quiet, and a third shushed them with the kind of authority that passed easily from one mouth to another in a place like this. Once, the guard at her door shifted, and the shadow of his spear wobbled. He caught it fast and remade the line. Celine slowed her breathing until her body believed it might be resting even as her mind stood at a window. When sleep did take her, it came in a thin sheet she could see through. She surfaced twice to Nyx's voice saying her name. The third time cold had crept up her legs far enough that the muscles in her calves cramped. She flexed them against the ache and forced them to relax. Dawn starts under the earth before it starts in the sky. The light hadn't changed yet when the air did. The guard shifted and straightened. Boots brushed away sleep. Celine opened her eyes and was already looking at the door when Kalen stopped on the other side. He did not enter at once. He stood where the corridor made a pocket of shadow and listened. She held herself upright and faced the seam where the door met the frame. When he lifted the bar and pushed the door inward, The torchlight pooled around his boots and climbed his body in slow bands. He stepped inside and stopped 3 paces from her. He did not hold the bars. He did not reach. He let his attention touch her like a hand anyway, heavy and careful, and she felt it as surely as she had felt his palm at her neck. The heat of him walked ahead of his words, and he said nothing for a beat. The quiet was not empty. It held the echo of him deciding to be here, and of her deciding not to be afraid. "You should be dead," he said. The voice came roughened by a night of being used, controlled, and strangled and hauled back by force too many times. It didn't sound like victory. It sounded like endurance. She met his gaze. "And yet I'm not. And yet I can't let you go." There it was, not a plea, not a boast. A thing said because it was true and there was no point in dressing it up. Something in her unclenched that had been braced for the lie he could have used instead. She breathed and tasted iron and smoke, and the last shiver of cold. "Then we're both cursed, Alpha." He closed his eyes as if the word had teeth, then opened them again and gave the stare back to her. Calling him that had not been submission, and he recognized it. It was naming the shape of the place they stood on. He didn't move. He could have reached through the gap and gripped the chain and pulled her closer until the iron dug new marks across old bruises. He didn't. "Tell me why you stayed," he said. "When the rogues tried to pull you out. The forest was full of shadows, and running was a body's easiest trick." She let the answer come from the part of her that had decided, not the part that needed to sound clever. "Because running turned me into smoke after a while. Because I am tired of being someone else's problem. Because I wanted to look in your eyes and know if the stories about you were true." "What did you see?" "A man held together by rage and will," she said. "A wolf held together by a bond it can't ignore." The muscle in his jaw jumped. He might have smiled if he'd been a different person in a different life. In this one, the reaction was a flinch that pretended to be nothing. The mind link pulled once on the air around him. He ignored it. The pack could keep its breath for 3 more heartbeats. "Was I wrong?" she asked. "No." He moved at last. Not closer. Not away. He set his hands on the bars and let the iron take a little of the pressure that had nowhere else to go. His fingers wrapped the metal tight enough that his knuckles paled under skin toughened by 1,000 small battles. For a heartbeat, she imagined his hands there instead of iron, imagined heat instead of cold. She cut the thought off at the base of its neck and left it twitching. "The pack will not forgive me quickly," he said, quiet. "They will look at you and see the shape of their dead. They will be wrong about what that means." "They'll try to correct you," she said. "They'll try," he agreed. "I will remind them who leads them." He leaned forward the smallest degree as if the air itself had weight, and he could not carry it unless he shared it across the space between them. His voice dropped again. "If you are a knife set against my throat, I expect you to cut. If you are not, I expect you to stand. Those are the only 2 choices that keep you alive here." "Alive is enough," she said, "for now. For now." He released the bars. He felt lighter for half a second, then heavier, as if letting go of one set of iron only shifted the iron inside him. He looked at her wrists. He looked at her mouth. He looked into her eyes until whatever storm lived behind his face put claws into the wooden floor and held hard. "Eat when they bring it," he said. "When I question you, don't waste my time. When you question me, ask the right things." He nodded once, and acknowledgement punched into a small movement. He stepped back. The room regained 1 inch of its size. Outside, the first true light of morning found the rim of the eastern roofs and drew a clean line there. The frost on the yard flashed and began to sweat. Up in the hall, a door opened and shut as the first crew for the day's work claimed tools and tasks. The pack's tide swelled. Kaelin turned away from the cell and left without looking back. Celine watched the doorway until the dark returned to its former shape. Her heart took that long to decide on a calmer rhythm. Nyx lay down inside her again, head on paws, eyes open. "Cursed," Nyx said. "Maybe," Celine answered. "Or just chosen." Those feel the same at the start. They do. She lowered her hands until the chain stopped biting as high, rolled her shoulders to keep them from closing in around her lungs, and breathed. The smell of smoke drifted through the seams of the stone. Somewhere above, someone laughed, short and tired. The stronghold woke the way a body stretches after a long sleep and tests every joint. Beyond the walls, the trees waited for the sun to find them. Celine stood in the cold with iron against her skin, and let the knowledge settle that nothing she chose now would be clean. When the guard came later with a bowl of porridge that tasted like wet grain and salt, she took it without looking at him and ate enough to satisfy logic. When he left, she cleaned the wooden spoon with the edge of her thumb and set it back on the bowl. She let herself think for the space of 5 breaths about what it would mean to be Luna in a place like this, about the weight of a voice that could thread into 100 minds at once and ask them to live through a winter they didn't want. Then she shoved the thought where it belonged, into the part of the mind that holds what is not yet permitted. She looked at the door again, already knowing the next time it would open would hurt a different way than the last. The final taste of Kaylin's scent lingered faint as smoke in a shirt weeks after a fire. The bond she hadn't asked for ran through the stone like a seam that only she and he could see, thin and bright and hard as wire. The morning settled its hand on the stronghold. The day would bring work and orders and eyes that judged and turned away. The night would come back with its own teeth. Between them, the shape of the road did not change. She lifted her chin and fixed it there. The chain hummed with her pulse and quieted again. In a cell 3 doors down, someone muttered in his sleep and then fell silent. The corridor held its breath. Above ground on the rampart over the gate, a sentry traded places with another and passed a brief word back through the link. Inside, in rooms too warm and rooms too cold, wolves stretched and rose and made the day begin. Down in the stone, 2 stubborn hearts beat their rhythms in time with a future that would not ask their consent again. When the footsteps came back toward the cell hours later, Celine did not flinch. She looked at the seam in the door and waited, already hearing his voice in the place where choices have to live. Alive for now, and for now would have to be enough. Dawn slid into the stronghold like a thin blade, brightening frost on the yard and waking the torches into a soft hiss. Under the hall, the stone kept the night. Water ticked somewhere in the walls, as if the place had its own slow pulse. Above me, the pack moved in currents I could not hear but could feel in the pressure of the air. A patrol checked in along the mind link, a quick, bright pull that steadied and faded. Boots crossed the east tower. Laughter rose in the kitchens and cut off fast when someone remembered what rumor had already done. Nick stretched inside my chest and settled her weight against my ribs. Hold the spine straight. We are not prey. Iron cooled my wrists where the chain ran through the wall ring. The healer's water had cleaned the cut at my temple, but the skin tugged when I frowned, so I counted breaths instead. 1 to test the ache in my ankle, 1 to note the guard at the corner shifting his stance, 1 to watch the torch near my door bubble resin and spit a thread of pine. Whispers moved with the first chores, not careless, quiet, the way wolves share doubts when they do not want to stain a day with them. The rogue is still breathing. The alpha brought her under our roof. Aldrich stood at his side. Why? I let the noise go by and fixed on the seam where the door met the frame. The hall above tightened, relaxed, tightened again as orders passed through the link. The center holding them in one hand belonged to a single mind, and even underground I knew when he woke fully because the whole place drew a deeper breath. He is near, Nix told me. The steps down the corridor came without hurry, each laid with a weight the stone knew. The guard outside my cell straightened before Kaylin appeared. His presence pushed through the doorway ahead of him, heat and pressure crowding the air. The door swung wider. Don drew a narrow line across the floor to my feet. He stopped 3 paces from me and measured the chain with a glance that did not look like one. No hand touched iron. He did not need to touch anything to press the world into the shape he wanted. For a breath, the room was only his lungs and mine. He watched me the way wolves watch a river that might run deeper than it looks. The tightness around his mouth belonged to a night spent strangling impulses until they learned obedience. The steadiness in his eyes belonged to years of doing the same. Fenrir moved under his skin, slow and heavy. The pressure in the cell changed, a storm building beyond the ridge. Nyx lifted her head inside me and showed calm, white teeth. Do not bend. Kaelin broke the silence with a voice that found the places cold had left empty. Why do you carry the scent of our border for more than a night? I heard blade in the question. I also heard a curiosity he refused to dress in softer cloth. You patrol farther than you think. Your trees closed behind me once I passed them. And your wolves hunt well. His gaze flicked to the red crescents above my bindings and returned to my face. He gave nothing to pity and nothing to cruelty. That nothing made space for the next thing to land. You are here because I allowed it. I could have ended you in the forest. You did not. The truth hit both of us. The bond made a fine sound in the air, more in bone than ear, and the place where his hand had held my neck last night warmed as if it remembered. Fenrir leaned closer. Claim. Keep. Ours. Nyx braced. Weight against the urge. Not yours unless we choose it. Not yours unless you earn it. His eyes did not move from mine. The gold held steady as if holding the color itself took work. Your father burned our stores, set elders into winter, cut my mother's throat on our threshold. You bear his blood. What do you bear of his will? I had heard that story in a different mouth, firelight turning villains and heroes depending on who needed comfort. Stories wear the face of whoever speaks them. I held the one I trusted, the one I had lived. I bear the will to outlast what lies made of us. I bear the will to stop being a knife someone else throws. He breathed like a man who has learned to pull air through ice in slow. Out thinner. His attention drifted 1 inch to my mouth, caught itself like a hand on a ledge, and came back to my eyes. You want me to believe you did not choose exile. I want you to look at me and decide what I chose today. He took the half-step that changes a room without touching a thing. Heat came with him, smoke and frost, and a green note that made my throat want to swallow. He stopped where the chain would scrape his chest if I reached. I did not. The temptation to test distance tugged my shoulders. I let it tire itself out. From the corridor, a spear butt brushed at stone and stilled. No one interrupted. The stronghold let the walls do what they were made to do. Your scent changed the shape of this place last night, he said. Mine changed too. He did not deny it. His wolf admitted it. Fenrir pressed a heavy muzzle against his ribs and breathed me again. The pull of that breath dragged at things I had wrapped in wire. Nyx put her weight there and held. Kaelin looked at the ring where the chain ran, at the clean line of dried blood at my temple, at the tremor in my fingers the cold had earned. He let his gaze slide toward my mouth because the bond had trained it and because honesty was all we had. He did not pretend. Then his control stitched itself tight and he kept his voice even. You will answer me. Who sent you? Who waits for you to fail? Who is close to my gates? No one sent me. I am alone. No one survives long alone under these pines. I did. Sometimes from skill. Sometimes from luck. Sometimes because killing me was work no one wanted. You were worth the work last night, I know. Iron sang when I eased my wrists. He heard the small note and filed it away. A pulse moved through the air, the mind link tightening and letting go, and I watched it pass through him the way wind passes through grass. Orders traveled. Answers came back. The center held because he did. I do not have to explain myself to them, he said, almost to the stone. Then he looked at me. But I owe them answers. They will ask why I live. They will ask if I am strong enough to keep you breathing without letting you break what we rebuilt. He shifted his weight and light moved across the scar lines age had no right to carve. Loss had done that work for age long ago. Now the lines were permanent. What do you expect me to do with you? The truth waited at the back of my tongue, uninvited and unwilling to leave. Give me a chance to find the rot that made my family run. If I am lying, You will know soon. If I am not, you will need what I know. You want me to hire my enemy, and I want you to look close at the shape you call enemy. It changes when you stand inside its shadow. Fenrir thickened the air. Ours. He pressed again, like a paw set on a map to hold one corner while wind tried to lift it. Keep. Protect. Nyx narrowed her eyes. Not while he feels a blade when he looks at us. Not until he chooses what he is. Kaelin listened to something without sound. The pull between wolf and man scraped him raw. I felt it in how the room absorbed his silence. He set a hand on a bar and the iron groaned like an old tree under ice. You should not be under my roof, he said. You should not be under my hand. I could fix both in one moment. And yet, he let it sit. Down the corridor, a guard fumbled and caught whatever might have fallen. The torch spit and flared. He looked at me with a hunger that had teeth and one that did not, and both made the same heat. He hated that. Rage had fed him a long time. This new thing did not live beside rage politely. I asked myself what my mother would say if I let you live, he said. Voice quieter. I heard answers I do not like and one I cannot refuse yet. What answer? Make certain the truth is yours before you trade blood for it. Something loosened in my chest. He was not promising safety. He was promising a measure. Footsteps approached. Not hurried. Certain. Aldrich's wait. The guard near the stairs breathed a name and held his post. Kaelin did not turn his head. He kept his eyes on me until the beta's shadow touched the line of the doorway. Aldrich stopped one pace back, respectful of the space that even leaders need to leave around a thing that can burn. His glance skimmed my wrists, my face, the distance between us, the angle of his alpha's shoulders, and stored the map without writing judgment on it. The hall is awake, Aldrich said, voice low, the words riding the link in the air at once. Quiet does not mean calm. Hold your lines, Kaelin sent. No one approaches the lower level without order. Then, aloud, they will hold. They will also ask, Aldrich said. They can ask. Aldrich's attention returned to me, not soft, not hard. The outer patrol brought in a snare thief at dawn. He swears rogues were near the North Creek 2 nights ago. He exaggerates. He likes his feet. Set a watch at the creek, Kaelin sent along the link. No torches. If they come, I want to hear their eyes when they see we were already there. The order steadied the air. The stronghold shifted around it. Aldrich touched the doorway with his attention the way a man checks the heat of a pot with the back of his fingers. You plan to keep her where every ear knows she is, he said. For now. For now, Kaelin answered. And when questions climb faster than answers, then I will be louder than questions. Aldrich's mouth made a line that meant he had seen noise used before and understood its limits. He stepped back 2 paces and let the corridor breathe. Kaelin looked at me again as if nothing had moved. Eat when they bring it. Keep your strength. I will not have you dying before I decide what your life buys. There was a little cruelty there and a twisted mercy I could live with. I gave one small nod. You are not weak, he said, and I know. Do not show them cracks they can turn into doors. Then stop looking for them like you want to be the first through. Something that might one day look like a smile touched the corner of his mouth and left. Aldrich shifted again, a quiet reminder that time would not stretch forever. Kaelin straightened as if pulling a cloak over a fire. He did not reach for the bars. He let restraint be the last thing in the room. He turned. The bond's thin wire hummed, a sound only our bones could hear. Fenrir pushed once, impatient and certain. Nyx watched, unblinking. He left without looking back. Light moved, fell, and was gone. The bar dropped and sent a small shiver through the stone. The torch hissed. The corridor took up its slow breathing again. I exhaled without surrender. The chain sank a fraction. The crack in the mortar at eye level kept its crooked path to nowhere. Above, the day climbed into roofs and work and eyes that would measure me when they had excuses to come this far down. He will come back, Nyx told me. You are not done arguing with the shape of him. I know, and if the pack tests you first and then I meet them standing, and if he calls them off and then I meet him standing too. When the guard brought water and a heel of bread, he set them down without glancing at my face. He held the cup steady so it would not slosh and did not jerk the chain to prove nothing. Discipline did its work. Or the order had teeth. I drank slow and let the liquid sit warm in my stomach. The bread was stubborn and clean. I ate enough to quiet the ache and left the rest. From the stair, quiet gathered again like weather thinking about breaking. It would. I rolled my shoulders and set my feet so balance would be mine when it did. Above us, the sun cleared the eastern roofs and pulled a shine from frost. Below, the cold stayed. Between, a thread tied two enemies, thin as wire and hard as iron, ready to slice or to hold depending on which hand pulled harder. The stronghold spent the late morning pretending to be calm. Hammers tapped in the yard. Smoke rose in a thin, clean line from the kitchen vents. Wolves crossed paths and looked past one another like they were not listening for news that had already found them. Underneath, the current ran faster. It pressed at the edges of the mind link until the air tasted like a storm that could not find a sky. Aldrich came down the stair with a pace that told the corridor to make room. He stopped short of the threshold and studied the cell, the way you study a map you already know by heart, and check anyway. His gaze tracked the ring, the chain, the distance between me and the door. It moved to the guard and made the spear stand straighter, without a word. Kalen's steps arrived a moment later. The guard braced. Aldrich shifted only enough to open a path. Kalen entered, and let the room set itself around him. Aldrich waited one breath, then another. He preferred counsel in private, but the pack did not give him that luxury today. Even the walls seemed to lean. Whispers from the west wall, Aldrich said. They want to know if the rogue lives because you doubt your arm or because you have a plan you have not shared. Kalen's eyes did not leave mine. They want their story to stay simple. They want to be sure you are still the sharpest edge we have. I am. The link tugged as if to test the claim. It was not defiance. It was the way 1,000 minds reassure themselves the center is still where it was yesterday. Kalen answered with a steady pulse that told them it was. Aldrich's jaw worked once, thoughtful. They will accept your silence for an hour. Not much more. Then they will learn to accept longer. Aldrich shifted again, weight off a bad knee that never complained out loud. You could address them. You do not have to explain. You only have to remind. The line of Kalen's mouth changed by the smallest measure. He did not look away from me. For a heartbeat, his gaze dipped to my mouth and returned, quick and unwilling to be caught. Fenrir rose under his skin in a slow, clean line, a presence that made the air denser. He lifted his chin the barest degree. The link tightened until even I could feel the press of it as if the stones had taken a breath. Stand down the questions. The voice moved through the pack without sound, a deep, low current that found every wolf, and laid a hand on the back of every neck. My judgment stands. The rogue lives by my choice. Any hand raised against her is a hand raised against me. The corridor shifted. Far above, boots paused on a stair and then continued. On the yard wall, a sentry's posture altered from coiled into ready. In the kitchens, a ladle set down with less force than a moment before. The stronghold absorbed the order the way a body absorbs news that does not fit and makes room anyway. Aldrich exhaled once, quiet. That will buy what we asked for. Kalen's focus did not move. He seemed to be measuring what his own words had cost him. I felt the aftertaste of the link on the air, metal and lightning and old oath. The scent of it stroked the part of me exile had made raw. For a heartbeat, I remembered the weight of belonging, and hated how quickly memory could turn into need. Nyx lifted her head inside me and set it back down with a sound that was not a growl and not a sigh. Do not reach for what is not ours. I know. A guard further down coughed. Another cleared his throat in sympathy. Aldrich slanted him a look that said the room had no space for human noises, and the man swallowed the urge to move again. Kalen stepped closer, The heat he carried landed across my forearms and climbed like a slow spill. He stopped where iron would bite his chest if I tested distance. I kept still. He did not. "You do not look afraid," he said, "and you do not look honest." "What lie do you think I am telling?" "That you could end me at any moment," I said. "Your wolf already threw that choice away. Now you have to live with it." Fenrir surged, pleased at being named. The thrill of it took a slow path down my spine. Kalen did not give the reaction a home on his face, but the muscles in his forearms tightened. The ring groaned once under new pressure. "Do not mistake restraint for weakness," he said. I did not. Restraint is the only strength that matters here. "So you do not think I hold back because of softness?" "You do not have any," I said. "You are a wall, you are a blade. You are a winter that learned how to walk. If you were soft, I would already be dead." Aldrich's attention slid across us like a shadow of a hawk over a field, a presence that saw small movements and remembered them for later. He did not interrupt. He had the sense to let a fire burn until it taught the room what it was. Kalen's mouth changed. Not a smile. Not a smile. He leaned a fraction nearer, the kind of motion that changes the air without making light move. The bond sang in the small of my back like a string someone had plucked with careful fingers. "Are you afraid of it?" he asked, quiet as if loud words might jar something loose. "Of the bond? Of the part you pretend you don't feel?" "I feel it." I did not give him the relief of denial. "I am afraid of what it will make me give up." "What do you think it asks?" "My anger. My name. The right to decide who I trust." "Then we are the same," he said. The honesty in that landed heavier than any threat he had offered me. Fenrir pushed again. A long, steady pressure. Claim. Keep. Protect. The words were not words. They were impulses shaped into the nearest things a mind could hold. Nyx rose and braced her shoulder against the inside of my ribs. "Stand. You do not have to choose now." "I am not choosing." Kalen's hand lifted from the bar. It rose slowly until the heat of his palm reached my cheek and hovered there. The space was a finger's width. The air felt like glass between skin and skin. His control gathered itself into that inch and stood there trembling. If he had touched me, it would not have been gentle, and it would not have been cruel. It would have been a name spoken by a throat that did not want to say it and did anyway. Aldrich cleared his throat once, soft, a sound with a purpose. Not to shame, not to stop. To remind a world made of instinct that other wolves existed inside it. Kalen did not flinch, but his hand withdrew with the same slow care. He set his palm back on iron and let the weight move into metal instead of into me. The ring accepted it with a low scrape. A young warrior arrived at the end of the corridor with the clumsy energy of someone who had run too fast and wanted to pretend he had not. He planted his feet, realized he had come too close, and took a half step back that only made it worse. His eyes slid toward the cell and away and left the stink of insult anyway. Aldrich's head turned, one look. The pup's shoulders flattened at once. "Report," Aldrich said. "North Creek watch is set. 2 pairs in the trees, 1 on the bank. No torches. They asked if the Alpha wants snares reset along the old log road." Kalen sent the answer through the link without moving his mouth. "Shift the 2nd pair to the ridge. If they smell smoke, do not follow it. Let it come to you." The pup stiffened a little, the reflex of someone who had been spoken to everywhere at once for the first time. His eyes went wide, and then he remembered to drop them. A blade of a voice came out of the cell to my left, old and dry. "Pups should not stare at cages. They catch habits they do not want." The young warrior flushed. He forced his gaze at the floor and kept it there. Pride trembled under his skin like a held breath. Kalen did not look at him. He did not need to. The link did the work. "Stand your post. Watch the far corner. If I feel your attention drift again, you will dig latrines until spring." The pup steadied so fast it almost broke something. "Yes, Alpha." Aldrich flicked his attention back to us, the interruption handled as efficiently as a knife slid back into a sheath. His eyes asked a question he had already asked, and would keep asking, until it had an answer that did not put his pack in the ground. Kalen held the silence in his fist and then let it open. "You taunt well," he said to me. "You learned that on the run." "It wastes less energy than begging," I said. "Begging would do nothing." "I know." We stood in the weight of what neither of us would do. The chain hummed faintly with my pulse. The torch hissed. Above us, a door banged in the kitchen, and someone swore fast and quiet. The link pulled again and let go. The rhythm of a pack trying to learn a new shape without tearing itself. "Tell me what you would do if I opened this door," Kalen said. I walked to the threshold. "And then?" "Stop. Because you are not a fool. Because I am choosing to live." "Good." He let the word sit. It warmed nothing. It sharpened everything. Aldrich's patience ended where the day's schedule began. He touched the jam with 2 fingers, an old habit from the days when he marked how many breaths a room cost him. "They will expect you in the hall," he said to Kalen. "If you do not show them your face, they will make one out of their fear." Kalen's eyes stayed on me, but the decision moved through him. He stepped back in a way that widened the space without weakening it. "To prove I can leave you," he said, and the smallest truth showed in the corner of his mouth. "And still remember where you are. Do what you have to." He turned to the door. The bond plucked that thin wire between us again, softer than before, a sound like water touching the first stone in spring. Fenrir rumbled his displeasure inside him at the distance. Nix watched it go with an expression wolves reserve for mountains. The mountain has always been there. We outlast it by knowing our pause. Kalen left. The bar fell into place. The corridor loosened a notch. Aldrich stayed where he was, the rare moment when he allowed the weight on his face to be visible. "He will not let them near you," he said. "I know. He will also not let you near him. For now." Aldrich's mouth twitched once. "You understand for now better than most wolves I have met." I learned it hard. He nodded, not to me, to a memory I could not see. We all did. He went after his alpha, quiet and fast. The young warrior at the end of the corridor kept his eyes nailed to the corner the link had assigned him, as if the wood itself would fall if his focus slipped. Time lengthened again. It does that in cells and sick rooms, in the stretch of a road you do not want to walk and walk anyway. The stronghold above carried on its work. The sun broke ice from the edge of the water troughs and set the yard to steaming. A patrol crossed the gate and vanished into the trees. The smell of stew shifted toward meat instead of grain. The mind link rose and fell. Bootsteps in the corridor pulled me back tighter into the room. The guard at my door straightened. The steps were measured and deliberate. Kalen returned with the speed of a man who had done what duty required and refused to pretend it erased what he wanted. He stopped where he had stopped before. He did not touch the bars. He did not reach for my face. His control made a shape inside the room and stood in it. "Say it," I told him, because sometimes naming a thing freed it from doing harm behind your back. "You should be dead," he said, voice roughened by use and restraint. "And yet I cannot let you go?" "Then we are both trapped." "No," he said. "We are both choosing a trap for now." The honesty of that almost hurt more than the chain. "Do not lie to them," I said. "They will forgive your cruelty before they will forgive your pretty stories." "I know," he said. "I do not tell stories." "You tell orders." "Yes." He took one more step. The heat that came with him rolled across the chain and into the bones of my wrists. I did not move. He did not move more. "Fear is not what keeps me from you," he said. "My wolf fears nothing that bleeds." "What keeps you?" "The part of me that remembers snow and red and a door that would not open fast enough." I saw it then, not the memory itself, the shape of the mountain it had carved into him. Rage had built his house. Duty had mortared it. The bond had arrived like a spring thaw that would take the beams if he did not brace them. Nick spoke in my head, quiet. Do not give him comfort for that memory. Give him something he has to carry. Then carry this, I said. I will not be your enemy to punish or your mercy to show off. I will be a choice you make that you live with. He took the blow without flinching. It was not a strike, it was a weight. He set his feet under it and held. Earn truth, he said. Earn trust. He inclined his head, not a bow, an agreement to terms no one else in the world would sign with us. He looked once at my mouth and put his gaze back where it belonged. He turned away. Aldrich was waiting just beyond the bend. The two men moved together the way river and bank move together when they have decided how to share force. The corridor breathed. The torch spat pine. The guard let his shoulders drop half an inch and lifted them again as if catching the weight before it fell. Nix pressed her shoulder to mine. Do not count that as safety, she said. I don't. But count it. I do. I stood in the cell and felt the shape of the room settle around the shape of my resolve. Above, the pack returned to the work that keeps a world from falling apart. Below, the cold held like a fact. Between, the pull tightened by a degree and then held, not gentler, just clearer. The day moved. The bond did not. It waited, the way rivers wait in winter, under the ice, loud and patient, ready to choose a path the first time the sun told it to. Afternoon bled slow across the stronghold, gold scraping the yard and setting the rafters aglow while the dungeons kept their old cold. In the main hall, heat from the hearth pressed into timber and stone. Kalen stood with his palms braced on the table, scarred by years of decisions that had cost more than ink. The pack's mind link slid under his skin like a river. Patrol positions ticked into place. A hunter asked for a new bowstring. A mother scolded a pup too close to the cook fires. Beneath those small currents ran the steady tension that had not eased since dawn. A question held in 100 throats that would not be asked out loud. Fenrir paced in the space behind his ribs, heavy and certain. Protect. Keep. Ours. The word had no sound, and still rang like struck metal. Kalen breathed through it the way you breathe through hurt that will not be healed by breath. He sent a brief order along the link to rotate the North Watch, and received 3 answers layered as one. The machine of the pack obeyed, because he had built it to. The man inside the Alpha did not always follow the same rules. He pushed from the table and crossed the hall. A young warrior opened his mouth to report, and then closed it again when Kalen's attention cut past him. In the yard, he stopped long enough to put his hand on the frost-rimmed top rail and let the cold burn his palm clean. The forest lay beyond the wall, dark and waiting, the kind of patient that outlives kings. He could imagine for one breath walking into it and leaving every name behind. For the next breath, he remembered the dead and the door that had not opened fast enough. He took the stair down. The corridor into the cells exhaled damp on his face. A guard stepped back into shadow the way a man steps out of the path of a falling tree. Kalen paused outside Celine's door and did not touch the bar. He stood in the hinge of the frame until the room felt his presence and the air shifted around it. Nix heard him before Selene did. The wolf lifted her head inside the tight space of bone and breath, ears pricked toward the door. He is here again. The thought was neither warning nor welcome. It was a fact with teeth tucked away for now. Selene eased weight off her right ankle and straightened. The chain whispered through the ring. The guard pretended not to hear. When the door swung inward, light slid over stone and stopped just shy of her toes. Kalen entered and the heat he carried followed, tasting of smoke and frost with a green undertone that had already become a problem. He said nothing at first. He did not need to. His silence had shape. He held it like a weapon that could be turned point first or flat to bruise, depending on what the next breath required. She met it with her own quiet instead of speaking to fill the gap. The rhythm between them took its place in the room, the way water takes a curve it has traveled before. "Why are your rogues near the North Creek?" he asked at last, a question honed to a single edge. Not if, why. "Because the ridge hides their approach and the current washes prints fast," she answered. "Because the old log road still leads to the hollow your people abandoned 2 winters ago, and hollows make good lies when you need to pretend you're smaller than you are. His eyes narrowed a fraction. You know our roads. I watched your carts from the trees for a year, she said. I learned which wheel ruts mean wood and which mean grain. I learned which teams sing and which bite their tongues. I learned when your guards laugh and when they listen. Did you mark our weaknesses? I marked your habits. Weakness is a story the victor tells. His mouth did that almost movement it had done before, the ghost of expression a man does not use often enough to trust. He stepped closer by an inch, enough to make the chain pull my wrists and send heat through skin that had stayed cold too long. What would you do if I took you there, he asked. Walk in front of you so you could see my hand. And then, point to the places where liars like to stand. He gave her the weight of a long look. The room did not change, it deepened. A pulse along the link tugged at him. Aldrich's presence came with it, cool and exact. The beta did not speak aloud, but the corridor felt the subtle tightening that meant he had turned his attention toward this door again. Kalen ignored the thread for 3 heartbeats and then allowed it to settle into the background. He had learned long ago to feel 10 things at once, and answer one. Celine watched him juggle silence and duty, and the pull of a bond neither had invited. Nyx nudged the place. Pride kept sore. Do not confuse need with fate. He is still the wolf who hates our name. She no longer needed the warning to hold. The chain at her wrists had taught the same lesson in less kind language. You keep asking why I stayed, she said. Ask the better question. What is the better question? Why your wolf will not let you end me. Fenrir came forward with a satisfaction that was almost a smile. Mine. The impulse rolled through the space and pressed on the edges of Kalen's control until the bars took up the pressure with a low protesting sound. He did not answer at once. When he did, the words were plain. Because I have learned to trust what keeps me alive. Even when it hurts. Especially then. A guard 2 cells down shifted. The dry voice from earlier drifted out of the dark like a leaf skimming a creek. Careful, Alpha. Truth sounds a lot like a vow if you say it close enough to a cage. Kalen did not turn his head. Eat your supper, Garen. I did. The old wolf replied. It tasted like iron and regret. One improves the other. Aldrich came around the bend with that steady stride that did not waste joints. He stopped behind Kalen and let his attention map the cell in one train sweep. He did not flinch from what he saw. North Creek Watch reports smoke, he said, not ours. Wind. Southwest light? Aldrich answered. Kalen sent the order through the link without moving his mouth. Hold positions. Do not break the tree line. If they push, give ground, and let them think they have taken it. He let the silence around the order sit until the pack's answer came back steady. Then he spoke aloud again, to Aldrich, without taking his eyes off Selene. If they are trying to draw us out, what do you expect to find under that smoke? A blind, Aldrich said. 2 blades, 1 runner. The runner is the only one that matters. Send Terran to the ridge, Kalen said. If the runner breaks right, take his leg. If he breaks left, take his breath. Aldrich's eyes ticked once, approval and a clean understanding of cost. He did not move. Selene broke the stillness with something that was not mercy and not cruelty. Your runner will break left, she said. There is cover there. And a deadfall he thinks you forgot. Kalen held her gaze. Do you want him caught? I want to live, she answered. If that means your pack breathes long enough to find the truth that broke mine, then yes. Aldrich studied her face the way a wolf studies wind for the scent it hides. He inclined his head a fraction. I will set Terran and Lysa at the left break. He moved away, the corridor bending to let him pass. The link's pulse went with him, bright and efficient. Kalen and Selene were left with the shape their exchange had carved into the air. You will not come, he said to her, almost musing, not today. She did not ask if he was reconsidering chains. She did not ask for a promise he would not give. You know what happens to a rogue under your trees if your wolves smell blood? I know what happens to any stranger under any wolf's trees when blood is in the air. He considered that in silence long enough for the torch to gutter and catch again. The line of his shoulders shifted, easing some small knot that had been tightened by years of standing against winter. "You will answer me again tonight," he said. "When the watch returns, you will tell me what they missed. I will tell you what they told themselves so they could sleep." He accepted the shape of the deal because both of them had run out of better currency. He stepped back, and for a heartbeat the room felt emptier than it should have. He turned toward the door. "Kaelin," she said, because his name fit better in her mouth than his title when they stood this close to something neither could name without breaking it. "Do not put your young wolves where your old ghosts live." He did not turn. "I already moved the old ghosts," he said. "They follow anyway." Evening drifted down the stair by the time he returned. The corridor had cooled again. The torch near her door burned a cleaner blue edge. The guard had been changed for one who stood very still because standing still can feel like excellence when you are young and desperate to be good. Kaelin walked the length of the hall once, listening. The stones sounded the way they always had. His feet did not. He stopped in front of her and the bond tightened until the skin at the back of her neck prickled as if remembering his hand. It did not take memory to make it do that. It took the simple fact of him standing where he was, breathing the air she was trying to make enough. "Report," he said, face angled so the link could carry the word up to the men on the ridge without giving them the power of his eyes. Aldrich's answer ran along the current. Smoke was a blind, 2 blades. 1 runner. He broke left. We took his breath. Names. No marks we trust. Scars say west. Voice said nothing useful. Losses. None. The link went quiet again. The corridor did not. Garen coughed once. The new guard blinked too slowly and caught himself before the next blink came late. Celine watched Kaelin bend the edge of day until it fit around the shape of his will. She had not expected to admire the work. Admiration had nothing to do with wanting. Both were problems. Nyx moved in her, slow as a bigger body rolling over. Want and use are not the same. Remember. I do. Kaelin's attention returned to her like a hand settling. It was lighter than earlier, the kind of touch a fighter learns after realizing you can bruise a muscle so badly it won't work when you need it. He did not reach for the bars, he did not reach for her face. He let control be every distance between them, and then did the most dangerous thing he could have done. He spoke truth inside it. "You should be dead," he said, voice rough from the day. "And yet I cannot let you go." The words did not taste like victory. They tasted like iron shaved thin enough to dissolve on the tongue. She did not smile. She did not look away. "Then we're both cursed, Alpha." He closed his eyes for a breath, not because the word hurt, but because it fit. When he opened them again, the gold burned steady. "Tomorrow," he said, "we begin again. Bring better questions. Bring better answers." He turned. The bond thrummed once, softer than it had all day, a string drawn and released by a hand that might one day learn music instead of war. He left. The door closed. The bar settled. The torch hissed its one small complaint and went back to work. Celine leaned her head against the stone and felt Nyx press along her bones like a second spine. "We are not safe, no. But we have a path. We do." Above, the stronghold shifted into night, the pack's breath trading day's tasks for duties that belonged to dark. Somewhere in the yard, a sentry stamped his feet and the sound came down the stones like a soft hammer. The mind link's tide rolled and steadied. In the space between 2 heartbeats, Celine let herself imagine a world where a bond did not have to poison a choice to make it strong. Then she put the picture away in the place where hope lives without being fed. The corridor settled into quiet. Garen muttered and slept. The young guard learned how to stand very still without locking his knees. In her cell, Celine watched the door and counted the breaths until dawn would put new edges on decisions that had never been smooth to begin with. Morning crept into the stronghold and found every corner already awake. Frost steamed off the yard. Hammers started their steady tapping, and the torches along the walls burned pale. Under the hall, the dungeons held the night like a second skin. Stone side, iron cooled, and the air tasted of damp and smoke. Above me, the pack moved the way a great body moves, nerves firing across the mind link, orders pulsing from one spine and spreading to 1,000 muscles. I could not hear the words, but I felt the pressure it left behind, the way the air thickened when discipline set its weight on a room. Whispers spread through that weight. The creak, smoke, a blind broken, a runner taken, and threaded through every fragment, my name without being spoken. The rogue warned him. The rogue saved him. The rogue is a knife with a pretty handle. Opinions split the way ice splits river water, two currents forced to run beside each other and never mix. A guard stopped outside my door and let his stare crawl over the chain that fixed my wrists to the wall ring. He was young in the stiff way that hurts. His nostrils flared like he was tasting the air for insult. "How do rogues kneel?" he asked in a voice that tried to be casual and turned brittle instead. I lifted my chin and did not answer. Nick slid her weight along my ribs and settled. The patient pressure that steadies a skittish heart. "Keep your spine straight. He wants to see what happens when your head drops." Another guard approached, older, with scars that had learned to be quiet. He angled his body so the young one would feel the correction without having to hear it. The torch near the door spit a bubble of resin and scented the cold with pine. Footsteps came down the corridor. Nothing hurried, nothing careless. The sound arranged itself before the man arrived, and the air acknowledged his presence the way winter acknowledges the first hard wind. The young guard straightened, then straightened again when he saw he had not straightened enough. Kalen reached the door and the corridor stepped back to make room. He did not even have to cross the threshold to change the shape of the cell. He did anyway, and heat followed him in a slow wave. Smoke over frost with a green undertone that slipped under defenses like water under a door. He looked at the chain, then at my face. He did not look at the young guard at all. The absence spoke louder than any reprimand. The young one tried to hold still. His pride made the next mistake for him. He smirked, the smallest curl of mouth. Nothing anyone could punish without looking petty. The mind link tightened on the air like a hand closing around the back of a neck. The smirk died. He took 2 silent steps back and found the position his body should have had from the beginning. Kalen's gaze returned to me. The gold of his eyes held steady, banked heat rather than open flame. He had not slept much. He had wrestled more than any night could hold. The lines around his mouth had deepened without making him older. "You warned me of the smoke," he said, "then you used it." "For what?" "To pull a thread you thought I would not see," he answered. "You want me believing you before I am ready?" I let my breath out slow. "You think I saved your life to make you easy? Did you save it to make me hard?" "No." The torch hissed. Iron tapped iron somewhere down the corridor. He stepped closer, not a threat, the movement of a man who wants the truth and knows distance lies. Heat slid across the chill and collected along my forearms. Fenrir rose under his skin like a tide. Want was not the right word for what moved there. Need was closer, but need has softness, and this had none. Nyx lifted her head. "Do not bend. That is his work, if bending happens." He studied the dried line at my temple, the bruising the iron had earned, the rings of red where metal and skin had argued through the night. He marked them without pity, and without the satisfaction of a jailer. Then he set his attention exactly where it hurt most. "You know the bond," he said. "I know what it does to wolves who lie to themselves about it. You think I am lying. I think you are trying to breathe around it." He let that sit between us until it stopped being a jab and became a statement. The guards at the bend in the corridor shifted their weight together without meaning to, 2 bodies answering a pressure they could not name. "You used it in the forest," he said, "and you used it too." He did not deny it. The honesty between us was a tightrope threaded with wire. We both bled when it cut. Neither of us would climb down. The young guard's attention dragged back to the door slot like a moth that cannot stop singeing its wings. He wanted to prove he belonged by witnessing something that was not his. Kalen's head tilted half a degree, a wolf's acknowledgement of a nuisance. The link pressed again, cool and iron, and the young man's eyes found his corner like they had never known another place. Kalen reached for the ring. His hand closed on the key that hung below it, the metal a dull part of the wall until it sat in his palm. He studied the length of the chain and the knot of lock and ring. He could calculate, reach at a glance, but today he wanted the weight of it in his hand. He turned the key. The click was soft and absolute. He did not free me. He loosened the chain 3 links and nothing more. Iron sighed against iron, then settled with a sound like old relief. He stepped back a small pace and watched. Not as a hunter watches prey. As a fighter watches an opponent he respects and does not trust. I could lunge. I could test the ring. I could wait. Nick spoke once, hold and I held. He had done this for 2 reasons and we both understood them. To see if I would use the first chance he had offered. To bring me close enough that what neither of us wanted would have room to convince us anyway. The space between us filled with heat from both the humankind and the other. He moved a fraction closer and I felt the air close the last inch on its own. His scent cut through the damp stone and took root where instinct lives. Fenrir pushed up with a slow pressure that wanted to be a mark pressed into skin. Nick set her shoulder against mine and braced. Even so, some part of me leaned toward him at a level that has never cared about pride. Manipulation, he said. The word shaped without heat like a piece of iron turned in a hand. You are good at it. Yes, I answered, because there was no victory in playing small. So are you. Then this is honest. It is. His gaze slipped against his will to my mouth, then climbed back. A man making himself use a staircase instead of jumping from a height and letting whatever breaks break. His hand lifted. It hovered in the space where his control lived, not touching. A heat my skin could count. He let his fingers curl and drop. The restraint moved through him like a blade sheathed with effort. Outside the cell, the stronghold shifted as a runner delivered a report through the link. I felt the corridor taste the answer. The pack settled, then sharpened, then steadied again. Aldrich's presence brushed the door like the shadow of a hawk. He did not interrupt. He took the measure of a moment and saved it for the hour it would cost. Kalen's attention returned fully. He had a question ready, and he knew he would not like the shape of any answer. Why do you keep turning toward me when every reason you have says to turn away? Because turning away has not changed the truth. Because I want to live. Because my wolf hears yours and does not know how to unhear it. Do you enjoy the power that gives you? No, I said, I hate it. There is nothing clean about a bond that arrives with blood in its mouth. He looked like a man who had spent years learning exactly how much he could take and still stay on his feet. And now the lesson had shifted under him like a riverbed after flood. Fenrir surged once, pleased at the admission and impatient with the pace. The alpha in him held the line. The man in him refused to give the wolf all the decisions. I saw that war and understood it too well for comfort. He stepped back and the room cooled by a degree. His mouth changed shape again, that almost expression that was not forgiveness, and not hunger, and not command. It was some new thing we did not have a word for. Your warning at the creek saved one of mine, he said. They talk about it. Do they call me clever or coward? They cannot decide. Good, I am both. They should be frightened by either. He did not disagree. The chain between us had gained 3 links and lost none of its purpose. He watched those links like a puzzle he might solve later, if he decided the cost was worth it. Aldrich's footsteps arrived without noise because some men learned to let stone absorb them. He stopped a pace back from the threshold, took in the position of hands and the distance between bodies and the loosened chain, and didn't let the knowledge show on his face. The west wall is asking, he said, voice low, the words carried by the link as much as the air. They will keep asking. Then let them, Kalen answered, not looking away from me. The link strengthened on the back of that reply, the way a bridge flexes and sets when weight moves across it. Aldrich did not move. He was not finished. They want proof. They will get it when I have it. And if they demand a test before then. Kalen's jaw tightened once, a small quiver through steel. They can ask. I will give them what keeps us alive, not what keeps them comfortable. A breath later, the link carried a sharper pulse, one that told the pack to use its eyes, not its fear. The corridor's air smoothed, thin ripples settling into a colder, clearer surface. When Kalen used his power like that, the world changed without having to be dragged into shape. He turned the key back through the ring and the lock bit clean. The chain shortened the 3 links it had been granted. Iron moved against iron, and the sigh it gave could have been disappointment or simple metal, returning to the form it understood. He looked at me, and the understanding that passed there could not be handed to anyone else without breaking it. We had measured one another in this room, and left with something neither could name, without bending the knee to it. Eat, he said, and keep strength. I will decide what to do with it. Decide faster, I answered. Waiting makes wolves stupid. Aldrich's mouth quirked as if he had swallowed a smile and refused to let it see light. He shifted his weight, and the corridor remembered it was a place for work, not vows. The young guard did not glance again. He stared at his assigned corner like the link still held a hand on his neck. Kalen stepped to the door. He did not look back. Looking back would have given something the room had not earned. He left the cell, and the space he took with him made the cold sharper. The bar dropped, heavy and simple, and the torch returned to its slow hiss. I let my head rest against the stone for 3 breaths and then lifted it again because I was not done. The stronghold pressed into the day, wolves moving under orders that fit their bones. The rogue scent on my skin had already become a second name. Every time a guard passed, I watched the nostrils flare and made myself watch the moment after, when civility did or did not return. Nicks curled along my spine and matched my breathing until it smoothed. He loosened the chain to see whether you would run, she said, and to find out whether standing close would burn the both of you clean or burn you down. Neither yet, no. But he is not letting you go. He cannot. Do not mistake cannot for will not. I know. Food came with the slow care of a man who followed orders because he wanted his face the same shape tomorrow. He held the cup steady so the water would not slosh, and placed the bread on the floor like it mattered that it did not touch dirt. He left without looking up. The yard above grew louder as the sun climbed. Metal rang where someone repaired a hinge. Children shrieked once and were hushed by a voice that could reach the mind link if it had to. The old wolf 2 cells down spat a curse at the dreams he could not shake and then fell silent when the room refused to listen. Time stretched the way it does in places where you cannot do the one thing you most want to do. When footsteps sounded again, they did not have the sluggish gait of a messenger who hoped to be ignored. They moved with a purpose that wanted witnesses. Aldrich appeared first, flanked by 2 warriors whose faces had learned not to show much. The older one had the caution of a man who could remember the price of arrogance. The younger had the clean anger of a wolf who had not yet paid enough to distrust his own certainty. Kalen was a half-step behind them, not because he followed, because leaders sometimes choose to let the room see what their presence does to other men before the room sees them. He took one look at the set of the younger warrior's jaw, and the angle of his chin and the air in the cell changed again. Alpha, the young one said, and he made the word stand straight in his mouth. We need proof. You have my order. I want more than order. Want has never led this pack. The young wolf tightened his grip on the spear he did not plan to use. She warned you. She knew the trap. She is one of them. Make her prove she is not. Aldrich did not add weight to that. He did not pull it away either. He stood exactly where the pack could see him, and the alpha could feel him. His eyes cut to me once, and then returned to the place the decision would be made. Kalen let the silence draw until it grew heavy enough to be felt by the men who waited. He looked at me as if the decision were already made, and he was only choosing when to reveal it. You want proof, he said to the warrior without softening anything. You will get it, She walks with me. The young wolf's nostrils flared. Satisfaction scuffed across his face, and then was beaten back into posture by whatever sense he still had. Outside, Kaelin said to me, not a question and not quite an order. You will show me where a runner chooses to breathe. And if I run, then you teach my wolves how to end you. We stood in the rough edge of that choice for a heartbeat. The chain hummed with my pulse. Nyx pressed against me with the weight of an animal who has decided to stand or die standing. I nodded once. Unlock it, Kaelin said. Keys answered. Iron moved. Cold air licked the skin under the metal when it let go. The weight that left my wrists did not take all the weight with it. The room had other ways to hold a body in place. We stepped into the corridor. The young guard at the end kept his eyes on the far corner, as if the world depended on it. The older guard rolled his shoulders once to loosen a tightness that wanted to lodge there. Aldrich turned and led. Kaelin matched my stride without looking down to see what hurt. He did not touch my arm. At the stairs, the cold broke in bands until the hall's warmth took some of it away. The yard's light hooked under my ribs and tugged. The sky was thin and pale and smelled like smoke and iron and the promise of snow. Wolves paused mid-task and did not make it look like staring. The mind link ran through them in clean lines as orders shifted to account for me walking where I should not. Their nostrils flared. The rogue scent rose like a banner I had not chosen and could not put down. The pack had always been a body to me even when I did not belong to one. Today I felt its gaze like a hand on the back of my neck and refused to bow for it. I matched Kaelin's pace. I kept my steps even. The chain no longer marked my wrist, but I could still feel the circle it had taut into the skin there. I did not lift a hand to rub it away. We passed under the arch. The forest waited, not kind, not cruel, only itself. Behind me, the stronghold breathed the way a living thing breathes when it watches a limb extend into danger. In front of me, the pines stood with their old cold patience, needles whispering the news of our arrival along branches that had learned the taste of blood and the smell of smoke and the sound of orders given in a voice that did not break. Kaelin glanced once at the tree line and once at me. He did not speak. He did not need to. The test had already begun. The pines swallowed the stronghold's noise and left the clean sounds of frost, creak, and breath. Snow lingered in blue-shadowed pockets under the trees. Aldrich led the line along a narrow shoulder above the water. Lysa slipped ahead without a sound. Taryn took the right flank. The young warrior from the dungeon kept to my other side, fists too tight on his spear. Kaelin paced near me, close enough that when the path pinched, his heat brushed my arm. He didn't touch. He didn't need to. The air adjusted around him. Keep the eyes high, Nyx murmured inside me. Be useful, and don't be owned. We skirted a windfall and crossed into low ground where the creek had chewed its banks. Smoke rode the air, thin and sweet with pitch to hide the wrong. Aldrich lifted a palm. The line stilled. Kaelin's gaze came to me. Where? Not the ridge, not the path where sound lies. I angled my chin toward a deadfall that looked like storms had stacked it and left. He didn't crane to see. He followed the line of my eyes, then watched me instead of the logs. The bond pulled like a taut thread between us, small and merciless. Fenrir surfaced in him with steady weight. Mine. Keep. Protect. Trip line, Nyx warned. Sinew or gut. Wire or gut, I said. Flat bark under needles. Hello, trap. The young warrior snorted. Gut rots. Not when it's fresh. Break an ankle, cut a throat while you blink. Aldrich flicked 2 fingers. Taryn lifted his bow without moving air. Lysa melted toward a better angle. Kaelin stepped with that careful patience of a wolf who knows the ground is lying even before it speaks. Left foot 2 inches back, Nyx pressed. Stop. He froze. Nothing showed but needles and bark. Iron lived faint and wide under the scent of old rain. I moved before thinking. My fingers closed on his forearm and pulled. He gave me the inch without fighting for it. The bark shifted under his toe, and a hair-thin loop flashed once, then hid. His breath let out, not a thanks, not relief. A decision filed in the place where he keeps debts he doesn't like. Blind, I said, one mouth, two lungs holding breath. Aldrich's presence tightened. Taryn drew. Lisa darkened and went still. The deadfall woke with a whisper. A line hissed. Bark cracked. The wrong sound came from the wrong direction. Nyx moved me faster than fear. Down. Kalen dropped with the push. A bolt cut the air where his throat had been and hammered a trunk. Sap bled clean and sticky. The second bolt met Taryn's arrow mid-flight with a sound like a snapped tooth. Lisa flowed into brush that didn't want to be a bush anymore. A short cry ripped the air and ended against her blade. The young warrior hopped the wire by luck and landed sloppy, then clung to pride like a branch. A second shape burst from scrub on the far side, small and fast, good at angles. Taryn didn't lunge. He put an arrow where fear would be next. The runner dipped, twisted, met Lisa's knee, and ate moss. The rearguard's rope found his wrist like it had been there before. Kalen rose low, hands finding my forearm where I'd grabbed him. Heat rolled under my skin and stayed. Fenrir pressed the inside of his ribs and growled his claim. Nyx braced hard against the drag I didn't want to admit. The young warrior stared at me, mouth open. He shut it and swallowed the look. Aldrich's voice slid through the link to steady the edges. Hold. Don't rush the second angle. The creek kept talking. Wind thought about turning and didn't. Kalen faced the bound runner. Tight muscles, thin cheeks, eyes that didn't like the world they were paid to look at. Name. Which one would you like? Lisa laid the flat of her blade against his triceps. A clean, quiet promise. Who set the blind? Aldrich asked. Smoke sets itself. Who gave the order? Whichever one of you left us last winter, whichever one will leave us next. Kalen's attention flicked to me. He wasn't asking permission. He wanted weather. Pushed rogue, I said. He wants to hear you lie so he can like the hate that keeps him warm. The runner spat at the ground. Lisa let the point kiss his skin just enough to teach him careful. Kalen sent instruction along the link without moving his mouth. Hold him. Mark the place. Reset the song. Let the next man think we're deaf. The line shifted, efficient and quiet. We moved upstream along the shoulder wolves use when they want scent to travel the wrong way. Twice more I angled my chin at small lies. A noose that would have taken a foot. A circle of mud pretending to be ground. Aldrich eased the column by a hand's breadth each time. This was Wolfpack's respect without wasting words. The trap that mattered waited at a bend where the bluff made sound behave strange. The air told me we had been seen. It told me we had not been smelled, which meant Lisa had been right to choose this approach. Heat flared in my neck. Above, a rock dropped for knees. Taryn shoved the young warrior out of its path. Another rock fell wider, clumsy and loud, the kind set by hands that believe force is the same as thought. Aldrich stepped around the idea a breath before it finished. I saw the bow on the bluff's lip, mud blackened to be clever. The archer adjusted for Kalen's turn, aiming for a mark that would put an alpha on both knees before the story finished. Move, Nyx snapped. I hit Kalen at the hips and drove him back. The arrow shaved his ear and struck soil with a wet sound. The young warrior swore and stared at me like the world had tilted. Taryn already had a bead. Lisa disappeared and became silence behind the bow. The archer didn't get a third idea. Kalen came up fast and slammed me to a trunk hard enough to wake the bark. The world narrowed to the heat in his hands, the ring of gold in his eyes, and the old tree taking our breath like it had a right to it. Why? One word, sharp. Not a challenge. Not thanks. A man ripped from a memory into this moment with no time to soften the edges. Because I want to live, I said, and I want you alive while I do it. You could have let it mark me. It would have done more than that. His grip tightened. It wasn't pain I couldn't carry. It was a wake-up that ran down every nerve where want and fear live side by side. Fenrir surged, rough, hungry, the sound of a claim. Nick shoved back so hard my jaw locked to keep any sound from living in the air. Aldrich touched the young warrior's chest without looking. The step that boy had started died right there. Taryn looked away to grant privacy to what wasn't his, unless ordered. Lysa reappeared, wiped her blade on moss and let her eyes say nothing. "Answer me," Kaelin said lower. "Because running from the bond won't keep it from dragging me anyway." I said. "Because you smell like the door out of a burning house. Because I hate that, and you do too." His breath hit my cheek. He didn't move closer. Closer would have turned this into something it could not be without breaking every rule we hadn't chosen and were already obeying. He didn't let go either. "If you betray me," he said, iron flat, "I will end you, even if it tears me in half." "If you try," I said, "I'll make you finish it." We held there while the creek talked around a rock and the forest remembered we were nothing. The link hummed with the pressure of 100 wolves feeling a moment they couldn't see. Kaelin's fingers eased a little. Blood climbed back into my hands. He didn't step away. He looked like a man who had sworn to avoid one road and found his feet dirty with its dust. "Move," Aldrich breathed across the link. "They left a second watcher," Kaelin said without glancing. "Not anymore." We followed Taryn's low path. The trees allowed us through with their usual indifference. The wall came into view. The pack's current brightened. The yard looked the same and did not feel the same. Eyes tried not to watch. Nostrils flared. The rogue scent on me burned like a banner. Kaelin's skin still lived on my wrists where he had held me, a brand the mind insists on hiding and cannot. At the arch he turned, his hand came up, stopped short, measured cost, dropped. "You walk under my roof with guard misoned," he said. "Not to shame you. To keep fools from teaching me what I already know." "What do you know?" "That I'm not letting you go, and I'm not taking you yet either." The words landed and stayed, drawing a thin line across the air I could have traced with a fingertip. Aldrich nodded once, accepting the world it made. Lysa and Taryn didn't need it said. The young warrior learned to hold his mouth still when pride wanted it to open. We went under stone. The smell of smoke and boiled grain wrapped around the colder air from below. At the stairs' tight turn, the stone tried to take my balance. Kaelin's hand found my elbow and steadied me with a grip that had already become too familiar. He released at the next tread and let cold reclaim us both. At the cell iron opened its mouth, I gave it my wrists. The lock bit clean. The ring accepted the weight, without a word. Kaelin watched the link settle, then looked at my face. The question still lived in his eyes, sharpened now that action had stopped and thought had room to breathe. "Why save me when you could make all of this easier by not—" Nix cut off the wrong answers, the simple one pushed through anyway. "Because I don't know how to stand in a world where you are dead." Silence changed the air. His fingers curled against the bar as if he needed iron to carry what he would not put into me. Fenrir's approval thumped in my chest and made my heart stumble. Aldrich didn't move. The guards forgot to swallow. Kaelin leaned until his heat ran along my mouth and down my throat, stopped there and left it at that. "We are not finished, no." He pulled the door closed. The bar dropped. The sound walked up the wall and settled over the corridor. The guard's steps moved away. The stronghold put its calm back together. Nix pressed along my spine like a second bone. "You moved him." He moved me, both. The day folded toward dusk. The bond burned low and relentless. Not gentler, not worse, just truer. I waited with cold in my wrists, where iron had taut circles into skin, and heat in my throat where his breath had been, knowing the night would bring the same question back in a rougher voice. Night gathered over the stronghold until every sound learned to move quieter. The rafters shrugged off the day's heat, and out in the yard the torches burned with small patient flames that made frost gleam along the stone. Down in the dungeon the cold stayed the same as ever, old and disciplined. Water ticked through the walls like a slow clock. I sat on packed earth with my spine on stone and my wrists lifted just enough for the iron to teach circles into skin. The ache from the forest still lived in my muscles in small, bright threads. Sap and mud had dried into my hair and the sleeve of my shirt, and whenever I breathed too deep, the scent tugged me back to the bluff, to the hiss of an arrow where a throat had been. The bond did its own slow work, that strange inner tug I had tried to ignore since the border, now tighter for what the day had asked of us. It pulsed and rested, and pulsed again. Not gentle, not cruel, simply present like a tide that does not care what houses stand along its shore. Nyx lay along the length of me inside, calm and awake. "You did what survival required," she told me, the words moving without sound. "Do not mistake a clear choice for an easy one." I told her I knew, and I did. The choice on the bluff had been a clean one because death had been close enough to count. The ones that came after would grow muddy again, and muddied choices carve people down to smaller shapes if you let them. I flexed fingers to bring blood back past the iron's edge and kept my eyes open. The corridor breathed like an animal at rest. Farther down, Garen turned once on his straw, muttered a curse at a dream that would not listen, and settled. Above, the mind link flowed in slow pulses through the bones of the keep. Less talk now, more watch. A report from the ridge tugged the air thin, then let it go. Answers filed themselves like folded cloth. The stronghold changed when Kalen sent his attention through the link. Even stone grew heavier. That weight came first. A hush eased into the corridor, as if a palm had settled along the spine of the place, and reminded it who it belonged to. Then boots took the stair with a pace the walls knew. The torch near my door lifted its flame like a head turning toward a sound. He did not pause outside the cell. The bar rose, metal on metal, and fell back as he crossed into the room with the heat winter cannot take from certain bodies. Smoke clung to him, and above that a clean, cold scent. The ridge wind still in the edges of his hair and the backs of his hands. He had spent hours holding the packs lined together until it became a shape wolves could sleep under. Control had a smell when it had been used too long. It smelled like iron after snow. He stopped as close as the chain allowed, not looking at it, not needing to. His gaze went from my face to the cut at my temple and back, and the room decided that this was the only line that mattered. He did not waste the first breath on accusation. He stole it for something harsher, a truth he could not let the night dilute. "Why did you pull me out of the arrow's path?" I breathed once to keep my voice steady, and felt the circles sting from that small movement. "Because I want to live," I told him. "Because I want you alive while I do it." The words sat clean between us. He took them in with the blunt acceptance of a man who has no appetite left for pretty versions of things. He stepped a fraction closer, and the heat he carried met the cold on my forearms and held there like hands that did not touch. The chain tested the ring. The ring hummed a thin metal note. His voice came rough from long use, not angry, raw. "You put yourself between me and a thing that wanted me quiet. It wanted you to kneel," I said. "You do not kneel for anything that breathes." The corner of his mouth tightened and almost became a different expression before it went still. He let his attention touch my wrists. The circles the iron had taught were darker now, edges swollen where the skin had argued all day and lost. He lifted his hand halfway, each inch a decision. He stopped short of contact and set his palm on the bar instead so the iron would hold what he would not put on my skin. "You made me choose you twice today," he said. "You made me choose you too." His breath left him slow, like a man learning how to move air around a wound. Behind him, the corridor thinned again. The mind link slackened, wolves elsewhere lowering their voices under a hush they could not name. The pack had learned to feel the pressure of our exchanges the way one feels weather in a house's bones. He should have asked about knots and loops and who tied them. He should have asked how many boots had scuffed the bluff and how wide a shoulder had brushed the scrub. He did not. He chose the question that had followed him since afternoon, like a dog that belongs to nobody. "What are you doing to me?" I met his eyes and told the truth that would not stop knocking. "I am not the thing doing it. You think it is the bond. It is one of the things. He stood there as if he had been taught to breathe underwater and was trying to decide whether this counted as air. Under his ribs, Fenrir moved with an insistence that refused to be polite. Keep, claim, ours. The words were only pressure. They landed anyway, and the bar took part of it with a scrape the stone remembered. Nick set her shoulder into me. Hold, she warned. If you hand him a story that lets him forget his work, he will take it and call that fate. I did not lower my chin. If you want to survive this, you have to stop treating it like something you can kill or spare, I told him. It does not care who bleeds if you refuse to learn what it wants. He watched me like a man staring into dark glass, trying to decide which figure to break to free the other. The gold in his eyes steadied, brightened, steadied again. Heat crowded the space without his feet moving at all. He reached again, slower, not to own, not to test, simply to cross the inch his control guarded. His hand hovered over the marks the iron had left. The air between our skins hardened. It would have taken a thought to close it. He did not let the thought complete. His voice lived there instead. You are making me weak. You were weaker when you pretended not to hear the truth. His fingers curled into a fist so tight the knuckles stood white. He did not swing. The bar carried the strike he kept. The ring cut a small complaint out of the wall that ran away in both directions like a quiet bell. A presence leaned at the doorframe a heartbeat later, not entering, steadying. Aldrich. He never pushed into moments that did not belong to him. He learned long ago to hold doors rather than rooms. His attention shifted the air just enough to keep it from turning dangerous while giving nothing to shame. Kalen's jaw set. The voice dropped to a hard line. They think you are unmaking me. They think anything not shaped like a weapon is broken, I answered. You know better. He took that and put his feet under it. It read like nothing. It was not nothing. He came close enough that the heat off him reached my mouth and throat, and the chain bit a little deeper because my body did what bodies do when they are asked to make space and cannot. Fenrir surged, done with patience, wanting the plain medicine wolves use when thinking fails. Kalen met that push with steel that rang and did not bend. The wolf paced and waited for a mistake. Nyx breathed slow to set a rhythm that belonged to us. Do not give him what he is proud of breaking, she told me. Give him what he is afraid to hold. You want me to choose you, I told him, letting each word seat itself in the air. Not because I cannot stand, not because a scent told my body a story it liked. You want me to choose you because you are worth choosing. Are you? He did not look away. The question rattled something locked deep as a cellar door and returned with a sound he may not have heard in years. I do not know. Then stop trying to punish me into an answer that belongs to you. For a breath, something eased in his face that was not softness, only recognition of the right wound named. His hand lifted from the bar and hovered over my jaw. He could have taken my chin and forced my eyes to agree with his. He did not, because force would have made the next breath false, and falsehood that close to his own mouth is not a thing he can live with and still be who he is. The corridor listened. Aldrich did not move. Farther down, Garen muttered a line from some old song that had lost its tune and then fell back into his creaking sleep. Above, a door closed with the care people learn in houses where night has taught them to step lightly. When you warned me at the creek, Kalen said, you bought yourself breath. When you moved me at the bluff, you bought yourself more. I'm not buying anything, I answered. Then what do you call it? Living. The word did not echo, it settled. He blew air through his nose in a sound half a laugh and half refusal to admit how close the laugh had come. He leaned into the last inch not owned by either of us, and let that inch be no one's. The heat climbed. The iron tasted sharper on the air. You do not get to own me, I told him. He did not argue. He changed nothing and made the room agree with him anyway. You do not get to break me to prove you cannot be broken. We balanced there, the chain a quiet hum in my blood. The bond swung between us like a bridge in wind that could not decide which way to blow. Fenrir pushed once more and then settled into a slow prowl. Nick stood on the inner edge and watched the water below as if it might teach her anything useful, if she stared long enough. The pressure at the doorway shifted. Aldrich's attention slid aside, the way a man takes a step from a path to let a cart pass without slowing it. The pack could hold. The choice belonged to the two people in this cell. Kalen moved first, not away from me, but past, and set his hand flat on the wall beside my head. His palm hit hard enough to shake dust loose. Grain fell between us in a thin whisper. He leaned until his mouth was near mine and let the words come from a place that had no room for ornaments. You will not break me, I will not want you. I looked at him until the gold steadied again and gave the room what it already knew. You already do. The line of his mouth changed by the smallest degree, not defeat, not victory, the acknowledgement a fighter gives a strike that landed cleanly. The mind link drew tight for a heartbeat as if wolves above had felt some rope pull and took a new grip. He did not move back. I did not. The chain dug in, and then learned the rhythm of my pulse again. The torch hissed and quieted. The night leaned closer around us in the old way of nights when people tell the truth because they can't carry it another hour. He closed his eyes, brief and honest, then opened them and met mine square. I should kill you, he said, and the words carried no drama because he had no use for it. The past asks for it every time I breathe. I know, I told him. He swallowed, and it looked like work. My mother's door would not open in time. I stood outside listening to the woodhold. When I smell certain things, I am back there no matter what room I am in. You bring both rooms to me at once, and I hate it. I did not reach for comfort. That is not a language he trusts. Then learn which room is this one, I said, and do not make me stand inside yours to be punished for what it kept. He stared like the shape of that sentence had found a way into him he could not block. Fenrir went still, listening hard as if the wolf understood the bargain hidden in the words and did not want to miss the moment it formed. On the other side of the door, a guard shifted. Young Bones tried not to listen and failed. Aldrich's presence tilted, more weight against the frame, the subtle interference of a man using gravity to remind a hallway. It has a purpose other than carrying rumor. Kalen's hand left the wall and found the bar. He did not lift it. He kept it in his fist and let the iron take heat. You will answer me again at dawn, he said. About the runner, about the knots, about what you know of men who set wire like that. I nodded. Bring better questions. He held my eyes, then added the thing neither of us had the right to say and both were saying anyway. And about what we are not naming. I tasted iron and smoke and the day that had run itself out. If you ask, I said, ask as the man who leads, not the boy outside a door. He stood there with both of those inside him listening to the other. Then he stepped back half a pace and finally brought air with him that was not mine. The space did not cool much. He turned his head toward the corridor. Aldrich shifted fully into view, gray at the temples, eyes that had learned to keep a pack's secrets. The beta did not look in at me. He watched his alpha and measured the way control had come back onto the man like a cloak that still fit, but had been touched by rain. Kalen spoke without raising his voice. Stand down the questions near the west wall. We will talk at first light. Aldrich answered with a small incline of chin, and the link carried the order up through timber and roof into wolves, who would breathe easier because something had been named even if they could not say it. Kalen's attention returned to last time. He let his gaze drop to my mouth because honesty was the only thing that kept this from turning into a lie, then pulled it back to my eyes because discipline is how he remains himself. We are not finished, he said. No. He lifted the bar and the door turned on hinges, quiet from constant use. He stepped out. The weight of his presence drew itself through the opening and left the cell thinner. The wood closed. Iron dropped with its simple, heavy certainty. The sound climbed the stones and found its old place. The guard steps moved away because Aldrich wanted them far from this stretch of hall. Garen coughed and settled. Water ticked in the wall again. The mind link softened into the slow watch knight, knows how to keep when a pack is tired and mostly whole. I leaned my head back against the stone and let breath stretch into something that did not shake. Nyx lay down inside me with her nose on her paws, eyes still open. "You did not give him what he came here wanting," she said. "No. You gave him what he did not know how to ask for. Maybe." The bond burned a steady line through the center of me, not louder, not quieter, truer. The old iron circles pulsed at my wrists. The place on my throat where his breath had lived felt warm as if remembering a touch that had not happened. I counted heartbeats until the numbers stopped trying to be useful. The night settled deeper. Somewhere up in the hall a door opened and closed with care. I pictured Kaelin under that roof, hands braced on the table that keeps a house honest, Fenrir pacing, the past stepping through a different door than the one he had just come from, both of them learning how to stand in the room the present had made. Aldrich would keep the questions like dull knives until morning. Lisa would sleep with her blade near her hand and dream of movement rather than faces. Taryn would count arrows when he woke in the dark and remember the sound two ideas make when they meet in air and one dies. I closed my eyes long enough to see a river under a hanging bridge and opened them before I could choose a direction. The torches guttered once and steadied. Cold sat where cold belonged. Warmth held where warmth had been invited and no farther. The cliff of what we were becoming waited with its own patience 10 feet in front of me in the shape of a door, a bar, a man who had told the truth and refused it in the same breath. Dawn would come with its plain light and demand a price for what the night had allowed us to admit. I lifted my chin and fixed it there so morning would find it waiting, unbowed, because some choices are cleaner when you meet them standing. Morning climbed the stronghold slowly, pale light combing frost from the yardstones and thinning torch smoke into faint ribbons. The mind link moved through timber and stone like weather. A tight pull, a slow release. A hush that felt like orders already given and tested. Whispers rode that hush down stairwells and along the hall. The bluff, the wire, the runner who did not run. The rogue warned him. The rogue saved him. The rogue is a knife made to fit the alpha's hand. The current split without mixing, one cold with suspicion, one warm with a gratitude no one dared to own. Iron circled my wrists where the chain ran through the wall ring. The skin had learned the shape. It throbbed when I let the muscles rest. I didn't. I rolled my shoulders until ache gave way to steady heat and watched the seam of the door. The torch outside hissed and filled the air with pine. Water ticked inside the stone like a slow, patient heart. Nyx lay long through me, a calm weight along my spine. Hold. The first wolf to shout loudest today will not be the one who wins. I knew. She nudged the memory of last night heat too close and a hand set on iron instead of skin, a voice that could not decide which room in a burning house it stood in. You asked him the question he fears. Make him answer it with actions, not breath. The corridor stiffened. The link pressed into the stones until the air felt heavier. When Kaelin set his attention on a place, even mortar held still. Boots took the last flight without hurry. The bar rose. The door swung. And the room changed around him the way a field changes when the first wind of winter crosses it. Smoke and frost threaded his scent. The ridge had left red along the edges of his knuckles. He had spent the early light keeping the pack from eating itself. He stopped inside the threshold. He didn't look at the chain. His gaze traveled from my face to the closed cut at my temple, then to the circles of iron at my wrists. The torch popped. He stood 3 paces away and heat across my forearms felt like he had moved closer than he had. You turned the bluff and I kept his eyes. You refused to die on it. His mouth shifted, not a smile, not anything he wore easily. You used what you were given. He stepped forward 1 pace and the chain tightened with a small groan. The room took a breath and held it. He reached for the ring. The key hung from a dull nail, invisible until it lay in his palm. He turned it once. The lock yielded cleanly. The chain slid by 3 links and stopped. Iron sighed against iron. He stepped back half a pace and measured what he had done, then measured me. The new slack lay cool along my wrists. I could have lunged, I could have tested the hinge, or I could do nothing and make sure he saw me choose nothing. Nix's weight pressed into a warning that was not fear. He did this to see if you reach for what he refuses to offer. I didn't move. I let the ring take the weight and made the chain sing no more than it had to when I breathed. Fenrir lifted under his ribs at the restraint, pleased and impatient. Mine. Keep. The pressure of that certainty moved through the air without sound and set its paw on the ground between us. Kalen's attention sharpened. His control tightened over it the way hands close around the hilt of a blade no one else will lift. You weave yourself into my house, and his voice low, into my men, into my choices. I hold my shape. Your house doesn't know what to do with a shape it didn't expect. You planned this. You stood at our edge and drew the line you wanted me to cross. No, I ran from lies until the trees forced me into a place where nothing was simple. The line drew itself. You saved me to make the bond louder. I saved you because I want you alive long enough to answer the questions that bleed. The bond hummed thinly in my bones, a note more felt than heard. It had grown clearer since the bluff, a string tuned tighter. His presence pulled at it, and mine answered, unwilling and unable to pretend it didn't know the song. He inhaled, and the link quieted outside the door. If wolves had leaned in, they now heard their own pulses instead. He had been born to bend shared attention without breaking it. He used that gift now to make the room smaller, and the rest of the house hold still. You think the bond gives you the right to stand where you stand? The bond gives us obligation. You choose what to do with it. He came closer enough that warmth climbed my skin in a steady rise. Heat gathered under my collarbone. The chain took weight I didn't know I had put on it. His eyes dropped to my mouth and climbed back like a hand finding the next rung after a long reach. You think I don't see the trap? I think you see 2 doors and 1 fire. You want to stand outside and call that control. He went still the way ice stills 1 step before it decides whether to hold or take. His hand lifted. The inch between his fingers and the marks the iron had left felt like glass. His palm hovered there, trembling. He set it back on the bar and let the iron carry the tremor. You bring your father's name under my roof. Coarse. Bare. You carry the scent of a broken link and expect me to teach my pack to forgive their noses. You expect me to lift you out of a story you helped write. I didn't choose that story. I chose not to die in it. He stepped into the cell fully. The threshold closed behind his shoulder and shrank the room. He smelled like last night's fire and the wind that follows thaw. The closeness shifted from heat to pressure. I met it with my spine and did not bend. You didn't answer me. Why are you in my fate? Because your fate caught mine. Because your name sits at the end of the road that brought me here. He leaned, not touching, as if he could force a confession out of the space between us. You think I don't see what you're doing to me? I think you'd rather be done with it than do the work to understand it. Air left him in a sound too small to be laughter and too honest to be denial. The corridor darkened a degree. Aldrich's presence touched the door like a shadow with weight. He didn't enter. He let the air know it could choose to behave. The house above held its breath, attention concentrated the way it does before a vow, or a fight or a mistake that will not be undone. Kalen put both hands on the bars and made the iron remember who it served. His head lowered a fraction until the eyes of a man became the eyes of the thing inside him that does not speak and never forgets. You are not my mercy. You are not my punishment. Then stop using me as both. The words landed exactly where they were aimed. Fenrir pressed. A river finding downhill. Claim. Keep. Kalen's jaw tightened against it and held. He released the bars. The slow scrape of skin on metal sounded like the end of a thought he had carried too long. He reached for the ring again. The key turned. The chain lengthened one more link. The relief bit, and I refused to show it. He watched anyway, like a commander noting the first flicker of fire near dry brush. He waited. I did nothing. A sound rose through stone. Not boots, not voices. The low, collective growl a house makes when the same thought is fed to every wolf. The link pulled hard enough to lean the torch flame. The pressure of many minds aligned squeezed the air thin. Blood. End it. End her. Bodies filled the passage beyond the bend without jostling. The mind link shoved in waves. Ragged fear, bright outrage, the metallic taste of being brave with someone else's throat. The corridor felt like banks holding a river that wanted width. Kalen didn't turn at first. He watched me the way a man studies the calm at the center of a cyclone to make sure it is still calm and not an eye. The chant deepened without words. Traitor, rogue, winter, widow, orphan. Names of things a pack remembers when it counts its dead. Nyx rose inside me, hackles up, not for fight, for dignity. Do not let their hunger name you. They want to eat something fast to feel full. I kept my chin where it was. The iron around my wrists reminded me what restraint weighs. Pine and smoke sharpened in the air. The chain sang once as I shifted my balance and stilled. The old wolf 2 cells down whispered a tired curse and fell silent again. The young guard at the end of the hall breathed through his mouth to hide that he had forgotten how. Kalen lifted his head not quickly, refusing to give noise the satisfaction of making him hurry. He stepped back far enough to turn. The room lost some heat and kept enough to make Bones remember it. He set his palm on the door and let the wood feel who pressed it. The link surged and hit something harder than rage and broke. His presence moved outward without leaving the room. He controlled it the way he had breathed in the forest, making a thing bigger than his lungs obey. Stand your lines, no one moves without order. The pulse hit the pack like a hand to the back of the neck. 100 shoulders settled an inch. The noise dropped a note. It didn't die. It gathered. Aldrich's shadow deepened. He stood where the angle let him watch both corridor and cell without giving any wolf the satisfaction of his face. The guards held their posts. The young one unlocked his knees before anyone had to catch him. The torch hissed, leaned, steadied. Kalen looked back over his shoulder, gold steady. A judge and a blade weighed a new kind of cost. You are not finished with me. Neither are you with me. Fenrir paced behind his eyes, satisfied with the shape of that truth even if it cost fur. The sound outside thickened again, a chant built from breath timed to hearts beating too fast. Fear had chosen its shape. The current shoved at the stair and pressed down walls. The house swayed under anger it had held before and outlived. Kalen closed his hand around the bar and didn't lift it. He spoke into the link the way some wolves speak into a blade before they draw it. Hold. Then he opened the door. Aldrich shifted aside without moving his feet. The crowd didn't press past the turn. Respect and discipline made a boundary fear would not cross without permission. Wolves filled the passage like a dark river tight between banks. Eyes caught light and threw it back as dull coins. Breath smoked. No one spoke. The silence said more than words could. Kalen let them feel the sight of him the way cold makes itself known when you step outside. He didn't bare his teeth. He didn't need to. The link shaped itself around him. He stood tall and steady, and wore the weight that came to rest on his shoulders the day a door did not open fast enough and boys stopped being boys. You want my answer, you will get it where all can see. Prepare the yard. The phrase traveled from mind to foot to hand. Wolves moved without jostling. The pressure eased as bodies found work and work steadied thought. The corridor remembered how to be a hallway. Aldrich's gaze flicked to me once, quick, clean, mapping the length of chain, the loosened links, the angle of my shoulders, the heat left in the air, then returned to his alpha. He didn't argue. He sent the edges of the order outward along the link, smoothing ripples before they could become waves. Kalen turned back into the cell. His expression said he had decided to step into a thawing river and did not plan to be swept. He nodded to the guard. Unlock. Metal moved. Iron opened its mouth. Cold air washed the circles on my wrists. I kept still while the shackle lifted, then let my hands fall to my sides with slow care so muscle wouldn't betray me by shaking. He stood very near. Heat still clung to the space between us, threaded with smoke and pine and the complicated pull that had tightened since the woods. His voice came lower. You walk with me. If they want blood, they look in my eyes when they ask. He stood aside to let me pass the threshold. The corridor smelled like wolves sound when they won't say what they want out loud. The young guard kept his stare nailed to his corner, like it saved his life. Aldrich held a space in the river for us to enter it. The pack's current thickened beyond the turn, organized now, no less hungry. Kalen lifted his hand. He didn't take my arm. He set his palm an inch from the air above my elbow, a touch that didn't cross skin and still steadied my balance over the step. He withdrew it before anyone could count the heartbeat. The gesture lodged under my ribs anyway. We took the corridor together, moving through the hum that gathers before a storm chooses a direction. The stair turned. Light sharpened as the yard opened its square mouth to the day. At the top step, his will went through the link again. No hand touches her without mine naming the reason. The pack felt it like a nerve lit end to end and obeyed because they remembered what disobedience had cost them in deeper winters. Cold laid its clean edge along my face. Wolves filled the edges of the court, shoulder to shoulder around the open center where sentences are usually spoken and debts paid. Breath hung white, eyes lifted. The hush could carry a single word to the back wall. I stood beside him and let the rogue scent rise, a banner I could not put down. Nyx pressed steady against my ribs. Stand. They will name you what they need to carry their fear. Give them yours instead. Kalen's gaze measured his pack. He weighed stances, fear, bravado, the small brave faces of those who will follow whichever way the wind blows as long as their children eat at night. He looked at Aldrich and received a nod that contained a history and a warning. He turned to me for a beat, the bond thrumming a low note that thudded in my throat. Then he faced the house he chose every day. He drew breath, the mind link pulled tight. He opened his mouth to give them what they had come to take. And the yard, the walls, the wolves and the iron under my skin, all held themselves ready to learn whether we had come to an execution, or something none of us could name yet. The yard held its breath. Frost burned white along the inner wall. Wolves lined the stone like a living rampart, shoulders brushing, eyes fixed, ready to be told what to do with the fear they had been feeding since dawn. The mind link ran tight as wire. You could feel it against skin the way thunder feels before it speaks. Kalen took the center of the square and let the house look at him. Aldrich held the line on his right, still as ice in shade. Guards formed a loose ring that pretended not to be a shield. I stood to Kalen's left where the cold came straight off the stones and the rogue scent rose like smoke. My wrists were free, but the circles the iron had taut still pulsed. Nyx pressed along my ribs with the weight she uses when cliffs are near. Stand. Give them your name before they put theirs on you. Kalen's voice did not need volume to fill the court. He spoke and the link carried it as if stone had become air. You gathered for blood. The answer came as pressure, not sound, a surge like a wave slamming a seawall. Name your reason. A warrior in the front rank stepped half a pace, jaw set, eyes bright with a hunger he mistrusted and fed anyway. She is a spy. Another voice cut in sharp from his left. She warned you to save herself. She is why they came to the creek. The rumble rose behind them, bodies bracing for their own courage. Aldrich did not look at faces. He watched the edges where panic is born and strangled by turns. Kalen's gaze traveled the square. You think the rogue is a knife at my throat. Heads lifted, shoulders squared, the link tightened until my tongue tasted metal. Then listen and watch. He turned his head a fraction toward me. Speak. 100 eyes moved like a hand. Nyx lifted her head inside me, ears pricked. Name what they missed and give it back to them. I steadied my breath. You are watching the creek and the ridge. You are not watching the old charcoal pits by the south stand. The air changed, not much. Enough. A few chests lifted faster. A few eyes flicked to the south wall and snapped back as if guilty. The pits hold heat long after smoke is gone. If someone stirs them once an hour, the warmth reads like a camp just out of sight. It pulls patrols off their true route because you cannot help marching toward what you think is meat. A murmur slipped and was strangled. Kaelin waited. Aldrich's mouth ticked once, not doubt, the quick math of a man counting what he would have to move. 3 rabbits strung high by the old slag stake, I said. The wind carries them wrong. That lure is for young wolves who still think hunger is solved by teeth. Somewhere in the second rank, the young warrior from the dungeon stood very straight. I could feel the scorch in his cheeks without looking. And the trap, Kaelin said. There is a wire under the dead ash. It will take an ankle or a throat depending on your step. There will be a runner in the scrub 1 hill back watching for the stumble. He will not help his friends when you cut them. He will carry news. Aldrich flicked 2 fingers. Lysa and Taryn peeled away with 2 more, quiet as breath. The link bent around them, cut a channel, and let them go without turning into noise. Kaelin did not shift his feet. He watched the pack watch me. A woman near the well had eyes like grit and a voice that had taught pups to hush. Why should we believe you? Because I would be dead if I were wrong, I said. You would know it by now. She held my face for a heartbeat longer and let her jaw unclench without apology. A young male near the gate called too loud for his own good. If she knows our woods, she knows because she was sent. Nyx rolled slow. He draws blood from his own lips so he does not have to count the cuts he wants to make. I know your woods because running teaches trees better than maps teach soldiers, I said. The link shifted, not toward me, toward the memory of hunger that had once lived long enough in their bodies to be recognized. Kaelin lifted his head and sent a thin line through the shared current. Hold the south. See with feet, not eyes. The order slid out, slid back, took root. The house breathed once. She could still be bait, someone muttered at the back. She is, Kaelin said, for me. The air tightened. Even Aldrich glanced over. Not surprise. Noted ice singing. She is bait for me, Kaelin said again louder. And every wolf here knows why. He let the sentence's shadow lie on the stones. No one stepped into it. The truth of the bond felt like heat from a hearth you do not want and cannot call cold. Fenrir rose inside him, deep and eager. Marka, Keepa. The word did not carry to the pack, but the new angle of his shoulders did. Nyx bared her teeth inside my chest and then went still. Aldrich stepped forward enough for his presence to be named. Authority breaks when the house believes the hand that feeds it is guided by a mouth it does not trust. Kaelin did not look away. Authority breaks when fear is allowed to call itself wisdom. They are not wrong to fear, Aldrich said. They are not wrong to breathe either, Kaelin answered, thin humor turning to steel. He tipped his chin toward the south tower rail. Taran. The reply came as a clean pulse. Found. Hot pits. Meat hung. Wire crossed. Runner killed. A ripple moved through the square, slow as a snake, fast as a rumor. Some chins came up. Some mouths hardened. A few backs bent stiffness into readiness instead of righteousness. Kaelin used the moment the way an archer uses wind. She saved my life at the bluff. Today she saved yours. A growl rolled along the wall and fell apart. The pack tried to decide whether to be ashamed or angrier. The link held them at the edge. A scarred warrior stepped from the first rank. His grief was older than my name. What if the saving is only to sell us dear later? Kaelin gave him the dignity of an answer. Then I will pay for the cost with my life before yours is asked. The warrior inclined his head a fraction, the edge to his stance dulled by respect, not vanished. Kalen turned back to me. He lifted a hand open. The square watched the small motion like they had never seen a door open without a push. His fingers closed around my forearm and pulled me one step forward. Heat flared under my skin where his palm met vein. The yard saw it. The link surged, then steadied under his will. He brought me nearer than was wise, nearer than the room would have allowed if rooms could speak. Fenrir's satisfaction pressed warm and heavy below my ribs. Nyx braced and refused to give. Kalen kept his eyes on his pack. I name her under my protection. Noise cracked, not shouts. A dozen breaths breaking at once. Some dropped their eyes in trained submission to a choice already made. Some lifted their chins and let the link carry the shape of their rage. Two wolves edged forward and found Aldrich there. Weight like a hand on the back of the neck, telling a body to think later and survive now. Under your roof, someone spat. Under my hand, Kalen said. Alpha, no. A voice cracked from the right wall. She will break the line. She will break you. Then it is I who breaks. Not you. He released my arm. The skin cooled like metal in shade. He faced the left, where older wolves stood among the young, the ones with scars that had learned not to speak. I will not execute a wolf who saved this yard. I will not do it to ease your fear or feed your pride. If you cannot bear that, you may bear the gate and the winter beyond it. Silence thinned the air. The choice sat plain as iron. A man near the second post whispered a prayer for sense and let it die when none came. Aldrich gave the smallest nod. Acceptance or warning, the link read it as both. Kalen lifted his voice enough to carry to the eaves. You want proof of my clarity. You will have it. We walk the south. We burn the pits. We pull the wires. We cut the hands that set them. You will see who refuses to come back through this gate. Anger needs hands and hands like work. The link cooled by a degree. Boots shifted. Shoulders loosened into readiness. He sent orders like arrows. Pair the scouts. Rotate the watch. Prepare the infirmary. Names answered. The square thinned into moving parts. The house found its stance. Then he turned to me and the world narrowed. Walk. Guards fell in behind at a careful distance, not close enough to look like a cage, not far enough to pretend trust. We crossed under the arch. The corridor cold felt honest after the yard's heat. The link followed low now. Judgment stored for later. Aldrich's stride matched ours. He did not look at me. He looked at Kalen and saw what I saw. Control frayed and bound again. Resolve set until it ached. You stretched their obedience to the last knot, Aldrich said without raising his voice. I taught them what to do with fear. You taught them to watch you, Aldrich said. Now keep earning it. That is the plan. Plans require two kinds of luck, Aldrich said. The kind we make and the kind we do not. Kalen's mouth moved once, a tired smile that could not afford to live. Then make me twice as much of what we can. They walked like that for a dozen steps, men who had buried too many choices and still dug for better ones. Behind my teeth a copper taste gathered and thinned. Nyx brushed the back of my mind with her muzzle. The line holds because he holds it. Now he has to hold himself. The stair to the dungeons opened its dark mouth. Boots took stone. The cold thickened. At my door, iron recognized me the way tools recognize the hands that use them too often. The guard lifted the shackle with a kind of care given to things that bite. The circle closed around my skin. The ring sang a small metal note. Kalen watched the links take me back and said nothing. His attention climbed my face and stopped at my eyes like a hand resting on a rung that must be tested. Do you understand what you did? Aldrich asked, not unkind. Yep, you cut us in two. I kept us from carving ourselves into pieces we could not put back. Aldrich glanced at the slack in the chain that had not been there yesterday. He drew a breath that fit in his chest and let it out where it would do no harm. Then show them tomorrow that the hand that offers protection also wields judgment. I will. And at night, Aldrich added ledger plain, show yourself which of those hands you believe. Kalen did not answer him. He looked at me like the answer he should give was sitting on my mouth. Tell me where else they will set wire, he said at last. On the east cart track under frost-heaved stones, I said. A bell tied to a root with black thread. The bell buried in a tin cup packed with moss. You cannot see it unless you kneel and take bark under your nails. The sound will be small. Your wolves will pretend they did not hear because they do not want to admit it. Aldrich grunted. Taryn and Lysa only. And on the mill path where the ditch kisses the wheel. They will rub fat on the axle and light it and use the stink to hide themselves. Who taught you that? Kalen asked. A winter that liked to watch us burn. I learned to smell it coming. He nodded. The link carried his orders thin and sharp. Above, a shutter closed against a wind that had not yet reached the wall. He turned to go and stopped himself. He came one slow step back into the space and gave the room something else to hold. You do not die today. The words landed on the stones like a stake. The chain hummed. The air made room. I met his eyes and let the simplest reply live where he had to hear it. And you do not get to pretend you want me dead. He took that and did not swing. He looked like a man reading a map he had drawn and finding a river in the wrong place. He left. Aldrich followed. The bar fell with its familiar weight. The torch hissed. The house moved around the choice and found a new balance. The south stand sent back the smell of ash and the report of burned pits. Meat that had hung to lure boys was fed to dogs that had earned it. The cold crept into the stones, honest as ever. I sat with iron around my wrists and heat still living under the skin where his hand had closed, and knew the yard would not forgive him fast. That was not my work. My work was to keep standing so. When the next snare sang, we heard it and did not spend our dead twice. Bootsteps returned and faded all afternoon. No one came to gloat. No one came to spit. The house had been given a command that kept its mouth occupied. At dusk, the torches along the inner wall flared. Patrols checked back in, tired and cold, alive enough to be angry at being tired and cold. The link thickened into the rhythm a pack uses when it does not trust itself to relax. Night came down in slow layers. I closed my eyes once to see if sleep would come. It did not. Nyx yawned inside me and showed her teeth to the dark until the dark remembered its manners. Feet stopped outside my door. Not a guard's careful shuffle. Not the measured pace of a wolf who wants to be seen. The bar lifted. Slow. The door opened. Heat crossed the line again and set it glowing. Kalen stood in the frame. The house hummed along his spine, steadier now. Judgment postponed, not forgotten. He stepped inside and the cold retreated the way it had all day, stubborn and quick to return. He closed the door with a care that told me exactly how much noise would travel. He did not look at the chain. He looked at the part of the room where a choice would have to be made, and walked into it like a man who had decided to stop circling the same ice. The night watched. The link stretched thin through stone, wary and listening. Aldrich's presence settled somewhere far enough to be decent, near enough to be a door if the door had to be used. Kalen came close enough that my breath changed shape. He set his palm on the bar and let iron carry his heat for one last moment. At dawn we walked the south together, he said. Then hear my questions before you ask yours, I said. His eyes burned steady. You will have your chance. The words were a promise set on top of a threat. Between them lay something noiseless and hot, widening by the hour. The torch hissed. The chain held. The knight waited to see which hand he would believe when nothing else was left. Night pressed close to the stone until the torch hiss sounded louder than it should. Kalen stood inside the cell, with the door shut and the bar set. Heat folded into him from a day of holding a house together with Will alone. The iron between us glowed a little from his touch and then cooled. He watched me like a man at the last stretch of a long road who refuses to misread the signpost. You are steady, he said. I am tired of being anything else. Good. He took a slow breath, like learning how to move air through a chest that had forgotten ease. The mind link above us held a low hum, patrols changing on the walls, a kettle scraped, a window eased shut. Under that, a thin vibration like a blade on a stone, a sound that meant judgment had been stored rather than spent. Aldrich's calm weight hovered a corridor away, far enough to be decent, near enough to be there if steel turned foolish. You make me weak, Kaelin said. You were weaker when you tried to pretend I didn't exist. I cannot pretend anymore. Then learn what to do with the truth. He stepped closer. The chain lifted a fraction as I straightened into him rather than away. Smoke threaded his scent, and under that clean cold and the faint metallic shadow of restraint, his eyes burned steady, not bright, the color of banked coals. He reached, fingers hovering over the bruises the iron had written into my wrists. The inch between his hand and my skin felt like glass, the space where his control lived and bled. You will not run, I will not crawl. Do not ask me to be gentle. I am not asking for gentle, I am asking for honest. Heat rose along my throat where his breath shaped the air. The bond thrummed a hard, low note that set my ribs to vibrating. Fenrir pushed from inside him, heavy and impatient, the simple language of wolves who do not decorate need. Mine. Keep. Take. Nyx lifted through me with her head high and her teeth still sheathed, a clean refusal to be less than the shape we had chosen to hold. Why do you keep turning toward me? He asked, quieter. Because the world keeps turning me toward you. You hate it. Yes. He almost smiled at that, a dry flicker at the corner of his mouth that belonged to the man I had only seen at a distance in the way he carried a weight without throwing it. He set his palm on the bar again, then slid it down the iron until it hit the ring, his knuckles whitening. Do you think I want to claim you because I am a man who takes what his wolf points at? He asked. I think you are a man who has spent years telling himself he is stronger than fate and finally met the part of fate that looks like a mirror. The torch popped. The sound lived in the small space before the night folded it back into itself. He leaned until his mouth was near mine, and the heat of him slid along my lips, down my neck, into the place where heart beat and will argue. You are mine, whether I want you or not. Then stop running. For a heartbeat his control held. Then it gave. Not in a rush, not the violence he had warned me he could be. It gave the way ice gives at thaw, slow from the edges and then all at once. His hand closed around my jaw, not crushing exact. His other hand braced the wall above my head. The chain lifted as I rose onto toes without being told. Fenrir surged, not a roar, something deeper, joy that had teeth. Nyx met him with a low, steady sound that was not surrender, not fight, an old acknowledgement that had lived inside wolves long before language. You will not make me small, I said. You will not make me lie. The last inch vanished. His mouth did not take. It met. Heat opened like a door in the wall of a winter house. The kiss was short, because the thing under it was not. He pulled back a breath, eyes still on mine, and moved his mouth to the bend where neck meets shoulder. He inhaled there, eyes closing once, like a man who has found the seam in a locked door and set his hand on it, knowing it will open if he leans correctly. The pack above us stilled, the link thinned to a single attentive thread. Aldrich's presence shifted, warning, acceptance, the silent message a beta sends when the moment is no longer his to stop. Say it, he murmured, mouth at my skin, and I am not afraid. Good. He opened his mouth over that place and did not bite. He waited, teeth resting just shy of skin, a question shaped like heat and breath. I understood what he asked, even if he would not admit he was asking. Consent has a scent. I let him smell mine, and held his gaze until his eyes answered. Mark her. Fenrir rumbled inside him deeper than thought. Ours. Hold, Nyx warned me, not to stop, to stay awake inside the choice so it belonged to us. I nodded, small, deliberate. He shuddered once with a sound that barely reached air, then his teeth sank into my skin. It was not pain the way knives teach it. It was impact and heat, and the sudden surge of something that had been waiting at the edge of a cliff for years and finally leapt. The chain rang once, a thin, bright note that traveled through iron and stone. The mind link flared white across the stronghold, and every wolf who had ever worn that mark felt it like a bell rung under the ribs. A chorus rose and fell from 100 throats that never made a sound. Nyx roared up into me, spine arched, paws dug into the old earth under our life. Fenrir answered from him, deep and clear and certain, and their voices braided like two rivers learning the same valley. The taste of smoke and pine and winter sharpened to something I could drink. Heat flooded my limbs, then steadied into a low, constant burn. The room widened, then shrank to the space between his breath and mine. The link snapped open inside my head, a clean line cut between us that no one else could walk. It did not come like a door creaking. It came like a thread thrown and caught, a bond pulled taut in an instant. His voice filled it at once. Not the one he used to command, the one he must keep guarded to survive himself. Can you hear me? Yes. Does it hurt? No. His mouth lifted from my skin. He pressed there once with lips warm from wolf heat, sealing the mark without wet or blood that the room would have had to remember. My body shook in one smooth wave and then fell still. The circles the iron had taught in my wrists pulsed with a different rhythm now, in time with something that had been missing and was not missing anymore. He held my face between his hands and studied it. The gold in his eyes had melted into something darker and steadier. He looked like a man who had put his hand on a live wire and survived, and could not pretend not to know what power felt like anymore. Celine, he said, and the world moved when he used my name that way. Kalen. He laughed once, quiet and rough, a sound he had not been allowed in years. The link between us hummed. Fenrir pressed against it like a satisfied beast at a full hearth. Nyx prowled alongside, alert, pleased, not offering her throat, offering her teeth to the same horizon. Aldrich's presence touched the corridor cautious. Through the house-wide link, a dozen wolves felt something shift and did not yet know whether to fear it or kneel to it. Kalen turned a fraction toward the door and sent a thread outward, contained and exact. Stand easy. No alarm. His control rode the new bond cleanly, hand on reins he had not trained for and already knew the feel of. He looked back at me and the private line snapped bright again, his thoughts sliding into mine without friction. You belong to me now. Answering aloud would not have been enough. I let him hear the words inside, then gave them breath too, because I wanted the room to remember them as well. Then don't let me go. His hands tightened at my jaw, not to trap, to anchor. The link between us opened wider for a heartbeat, and I saw a flash that was not mine. A door that did not open, cold air, a boy's palms on wood. His own breath turned to knives inside his chest. The image pulled at him like undertow. Fenrir stood between that memory and the present with his hackles up, fangs bared at ghosts. I moved without the chain rattling and set my forehead to his. Light, steady, the way wolves greet when they agree to stand back to back. The slice of that old day receded. The cell returned, small and hot and real. He breathed, and I felt it through skin and metal and the new line we shared. He drew from it, not greedily, exactly enough to put his feet under him again. There was blood at your mouth, he sent along the line, the thought a half laugh at his own expense and a confession. I tasted copper on my tongue and realized it was his, not mine. The mark had pulled from him too. I swallowed and felt the bond flare once in answer, pleased with the exchange it had demanded. You bit too deep, I sent, dry, and felt him smile inside his skull without letting it touch his mouth. You braced too hard, he sent back, and I will always brace. Good. We stood like that while the house shifted its weight overhead and learned how to breathe around what had changed. Along the outer walls, a patrol paused, not knowing why, then moved on with senses stretched. In the kitchens, a pot settled into simmer and somebody forgot to curse it. Far beyond the south stand, a fire on an old pit died for lack of hands to feed it. Aldrich rapped once, bare knuckles to wood, the quietest sound and still respectful. He did not open the door. Kalen did not step back. He set his voice on the private line rather than the hall. "We will tell them in the morning and we will show them," I answered. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. He had not earned that familiar touch and still gave it because the bond had decided it was not theft, and my spine did not argue. He did not use it to soften what he sent next. This changes everything. It changes nothing we did not already know. It changes the terms of war. Then we learn them fast and a flicker of humor sharper than a blade. "You plan to teach me my work. I plan to keep you alive until you teach yourself the part that was always yours." He went very still, the sort of stillness that means a man has just felt a truth click into place under his hand. He lowered his forehead to mine again for a breath that wasn't about heat or ownership, just the simple relief of a weight shared. The pack stirred above, restless. A question rolled across the link. Why did the yard feel different? Kalen sent an answer that gave them what they could carry and nothing they could wield against us. "We have a new line to hold. Sleep." Aldrich's gravity shifted away from the door. He moved without making space feel abandoned. The trick of a beta who has had to leave his alpha alone with decisions too many times to count. The corridor exhaled. The torch hissed once and quieted. Kalen looked at the mark with the intensity of a craftsman checking his own cut. It had already begun to darken into a shape that would live there. Not a wound. A sign. No more blood than a winter thorn drawn across skin. He lifted his hand and did not touch it. The same careful inch he had held all day for different reasons. He looked up and let me see the part of him that still feared the boy at the door. "If I break, you pull me back," he sent, stark as oath. "If you break, I break you back into the right shapes," I sent. He laughed quietly again, a sound I liked more than I should have. The bond thrummed once in agreement. Fenrir settled heavy and watchful. Nyx circled once, and lay down with her head on her paws, eyes open. He stepped away a fraction, and the chain hummed its thin song when my arms took their own weight again. The loss of his heat did not slap. It receded like tide, slow, promising return. He set his palm on the bar and addressed the room with the temper he had refined for public use. "At dawn I will call the south, you will walk with me, you will answer, and I will answer. After that they will watch and judge. They will judge either way." "They will," he agreed. He did not open the door, he watched me. The private line made words useless for a long beat, and we used it without being soft. "Do you regret it? No. Do you?" "No." He angled his head. "Say it once more." "Then don't let me go." Something eased in his shoulders that had been weight for years and could not be named by any other mouth. He gave a small nod that set dust drifting from the stone above the bar. He lifted the door just enough to break the seal of air, then paused. His voice came through the link this time rather than the hall. "Sleep if you can. Teach me how." He sent back a wordless pulse that felt like a hand over a frantic heart until it remembers to beat, and some of the iron in my wrists quietly stopped trying to live there. The bond hummed once, content. He left on that hum, the door closing without scrape, the bar dropping with the weight of a thing that had always been heavy and now had a different purpose. The stronghold adjusted in slow inches. The mind link found a new groove to run through. Wolves on watch felt a thread tighten, and for the first time since dawn let their hands relax on the railing. The cold reclaimed the corners of the cell, but it did not reach the place the heat had set itself. I leaned my head back. The mark throbbed once, not pain. Announcement, like a drum touched by a palm to let the music know it was being held. Nyx lifted her head, curious, proud, a little fierce. "He will try to leave the room he just made," she said. "I will keep the door open. Do not become a door for him. Be the wall he leans on to reach the handle he forgot he already holds." I smiled in the dark where no one could name it stupid. The pack's breathing steadied through the stone. Somewhere, a baby nuzzled at quiet milk and let go of a fist. Somewhere, 2 old wolves shared a blanket for the first time since a winter years gone. Somewhere, the runner's last message died with him and never found ears. On the private line, he opened a fraction of himself again, unguarded, the way a man who made it through a night does when he allows one person to read the ledger the house will never see. Are you warm? Yes, and good. His thought faded to the edge of sleep. Mine followed slower, fighting a habit of vigilance I had learned the hard way. The mark beat time against my pulse until the rhythm matched. The chain held my wrists without malice. The self forgot it had kept other bodies before. I closed my eyes just long enough to see snow and starlight, not smoke, and when I opened them, the torch's flame had settled into a small, honest triangle that did not crack. Just before sleep took him, his mind brushed mine again with a whisper that did not need air. You belong to me now, and it didn't land like a lock, it landed like a vow, and then don't let me go.